Understanding Order 8.2, I move that Councillor Gerald Brown, Deputy Mayor, preside over this meeting, and that we all send our best wishes to the Mayor as she recovers from an illness.
Is that agreed? Thank you. Welcome to Hammersmith and Fulham's Council meeting, including our guests in the audience and those watching on YouTube. I'm Councillor Gerald Brown, Deputy Mayor of the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham, and I will be chairing tonight's meeting in the absence of the Mayor, Councillor Patricia Quigley, who is unwell, and we all send her good wishes and for a speedy recovery. This is a hybrid meeting where councillors may be contributing from home as well as from here in the chamber. Members joining remotely cannot participate or vote on decision reports. To make the meeting more accessible, we will be supported by the British Sign Language interpreters. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and by participating, you are consenting to being recorded. Councillors, if the whip has not provided me with your name and you wish to speak, please raise your hand and wait until I call you. If you wish to raise a point under standing orders, please raise your hand and I will invite you to speak at a suitable point. When called to speak, please state the standing order you wish to use. Please wait patiently and do not interrupt the person speaking. If you wish to raise a point of order or personal explanation, you may interrupt the councillor speaking. However, please ensure your points are factual, brief, and to the point. Please be patient. At the end of each debate or report, I will formally put the recommendations or motion to the vote. For any councillors joining on Zoom, please keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. I would also like to remind members that it is customary to stand when speaking if you're able to, so you can be clearly seen and heard. If you're watching at home and would like to follow along with the agenda, there's a link in the description on YouTube. Fire alarm instructions. If the fire alarm sounds, please leave the meeting calmly by the nearest exit, which is through the doors on the right-hand side of the main entrance, just over there. Officers will direct you to the assembly point on Blacks Road. The meeting will be taken as adjourned until it can be safely assumed we can go ahead with business. Toilets can be found through the door at the back of the room to my right. Apologies for absence, item 1.
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Emma Alpthorpe, Patricia Quigley, Bora Kwan, Lisa Homan, Ben Coleman, Mercy Ume, Anne Rosenberg, Alex Carmel, David Morton, and Councillor Campbell Simon.
Thank you.
There's one more.
Oh, yes.
Councillor Ronnie Alford as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Yes,
Mayor, I'd like to declare declare non-registrable interest in item number 6.1 as my mother uses our free home care services.
Oh, thank you. Item 3, minutes. Are the minutes of the council meeting held on the 10th of July 2024 agreed? Thank you. Yep. Item 4, announcements. It is with great sadness that I have 3 deaths to announce tonight. I'm saddened to announce the passing of Monique Newton, founder of Smile Brigade CIC, which provided over 90,000 meals and grocery bags to vulnerable residents in Hammersmith and Fulham during the pandemic. Monique will be truly missed by all who knew her. I would like to invite Councillors Trey Campbell Simon and Nico Sulu to say a few words. Thank you. So, okay, so Nicholas Soulis, if you'd like to start, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's a sad occasion to be speaking on this about Monique, not just because she was a friend, she was also my boss, but that was a relation, but also because Monique would have absolutely hated a moment where people talk about her and praise her, because that's how she was. She was the epitome of selflessness and of someone who does things in the background, does them brilliantly, and doesn't want to take any of the credit. I know many people who knew her and many who benefited from her without knowing that they did. I had the privilege of working with her for many years during the pandemic as part of the Smile Brigade. And I'll mention that in a moment. Monique was Hammersmith, Fulham, born and bred. I think she went to Flora Gardens Primary School. And this was where she spent most of her life. This was where she established the Smile Brigade. That was in 2019, and it started as a small sort of soup kitchen based in the Claremont Community Hall, every week doing a sort of service for local residents. And then when the pandemic happened, Monique, not being someone who would just sit back and let others take the reins and help the community, she decided to turn this into a massive, incredibly professional, incredibly organized operation with hundreds of volunteers, and at the peak, I think maybe like 50, 60 customers, beneficiaries every day who would receive hot meals and groceries from her and the fantastic army of volunteers. And she worked very closely with the council. As you said, there was tens of thousands of meals, and during those two Christmases in 2020 and 2021, when the council could not hold the annual Christmas meals at the Novotel, it was again Monique and the team at the Smile Brigade and the army of volunteers that put all this together in the small kitchen in the Claremont Community Hall and made sure that vulnerable residents and older residents would have not just a meal, but they would also have, someone to chat with. They would also have a gift. And she went above and beyond for all of them. She worked 24/7 throughout the pandemic. Obviously, this took its toll. And when the pandemic was over, and when for a moment the Smile Brigade said, we will stop and take a moment, Monique was never able to come back. And although she was someone that had worked for in mental health and made sure that everyone around her was happy and had a smile, and she always was the first person to ask, how are you actually doing? She herself sadly could not follow her own advice and follow her own example. And she did sadly take her own life in September at the age of just 32. What I will remember from Monique, apart from the great chats we had and how she selflessly tried to help so many people, was also the fact how we had in the H&F Community Awards, Civic Awards, how she made sure that people around us at the table were not just her and other members of staff, but she also brought on other vulnerable people that had benefited from the service to give them the opportunity to be part of this glamorous event at the Bush Hall. It's sad that there's not even a single photo of Monique from that event because she always made sure not to be in the photo. And I'll just leave you with actually what was Monique's words. She said to me at some point, please do not let the negative voices or bad days get you down or take away from all the positive things you have achieved. It's a shame she couldn't follow that, but I'm sure she would be very happy if we all follow that advice. And I hope the council will be taking measures to recognize her amazing work, perhaps even at the place where she did such a great job, the Claremont Community Hall. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I believe Councillor Campbell-Simon is not present. Who wish to speak? He's present? No? In which case, any other speakers?
Madam Mayor.
You'd like to speak? Perfect.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. We were saddened also to hear of the death of Monique Newton, the founder of the Smile Brigade. The Smile Brigade was an amazing social enterprise, offering free and subsidised food and services to those on low income during the pandemic. She was a real community champion and sadly has died far too young. We would like to send our deepest condolences to her family and friends. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Any other speaker? In which case I'll move on. On the 8th of October, we lost Gerald Woonwell, former councillor and leader of the opposition. I invite councillors Amanda Lloyd-Harris, Wesley Harcourt, and Stephen Kahn to say a few words. Thank you. We'll start with Amanda Lloyd-Harris, if you wish. Oh,
I will go first,
Perfect.
please, Madam Deputy Mayor.
certainly.
We were very saddened to hear of the death of Gerald Woonwell. He was Conservative group leader for 8 years between 1991 and 1999. And as our Conservative group leader, I would like to thank him for his service and dedication to our borough, and to send my love, sympathies, prayers and condolences to his widow, family and many friends. Now, Madam Mayor, with your permission, Councillor Alford has also asked me to read out her tribute to Gerald. Councillor Alford writes, Gerald was a long-standing Conservative councillor. He was an indefatigable campaigner and very knowledgeable. He worked extremely hard for the 1990 election, which resulted in considerable Conservative gains. He came to the council's rescue during the swap scandal, and Councillor Alford is sure that the resolution that was found was due to Gerald's hard work. In the council chamber, Gerald was a great orator, and he subsequently became Conservative group leader, a position he held until 1999. He led an effective and vocal opposition, holding the Labour administration to account. He was always smartly dressed and emphasised the importance of this to our councillors, particularly for the Remembrance Day parade. Gerald and his wife Lizzie were long-time Fulham residents and were very much part of the whole community. He had a long-standing respect for his Sullivan Ward residents, and on his retirement was greatly missed. Gerald lived a long and full life and will be remembered for a long time, both by his residents and friends. Councillor Alford finishes by saying she sends her condolences to his family. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Lloyd-Harris, would you like to speak?
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Gerald was a friend and a mentor to me, and also a mentor to Councillor Carmel. I had lunch with he and his wife Elizabeth, as well as former Councillor Emil Eluzazi and his husband in August. Lunches and debates were a regular event, and on this occasion, besides talking about the Conservative leadership battle, we talked about the Middle East. Now, for those who didn't know both colleagues, they were leader and deputy leader of the Conservative group for 8 years. Emil was the fiery and emotional one, and Gerald, yes, I can see you remember, and Gerald was the voice of reason and calmness. I would not like you to believe that he did not have very strong opinions, as he did. This was present in council meetings and his lifelong interest in planning and what would be of benefit to the residents of the borough. He was instrumental in the early stages of the Westfield development. For those who remember Gerald, he was someone whose presence commanded attention, especially in the council chamber. When he got up to speak, you pushed your chair back, as heavy as they were, because you knew you were about to hear and see a performance. He was an orator. He knew his subject matter and delivered speeches that stayed long after the meeting finished. He was always willing to work in a collaborative way with the Labour administration, especially when they got into the financial trouble with the swap scandal. He spent months and months supporting the administration and working with lawyers to ensure that the borough was not left bankrupt. Dame Sally Power rang me last week to reminisce about Gerald, and actually again last night, to say that Ian Coleman found him a person of stature who was dedicated to making life better for all residents of the borough. He thought so highly of him that he invited him to his 60th birthday party, which I have to say was a brilliant night. Anyway, moving on. One of the earliest experiences of Gerald was on a selection panel, and that was in the mid-90s. And on this occasion, I was not selected by the panel. Gerald and I ran into each other outside the TA some years later, and he said to me, "I must apologise to you." And I was thinking, what for? But he says, "As I didn't support you at that panel because you sounded too much like a can-do person." And he said, "What I've always wanted to do is actually to apologise and say I was sorry, I made a mistake." That meant a lot to me. And he was an honest and genuine person who was capable of apologising. I will miss him, his presence, whether at Music by the Bridge concerts, All Saints Church, the Hurlingham Club, and his legendary encyclopedic memory. Razor sharp right up until the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wesley. Wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. It is indeed with much sadness that I learned of the passing of former councillor Gerald Woonwell just about a week ago. When I was first elected in 1994, Councillor Woonwell was the leader of the opposition, and I sat on the planning committee with him, both as an ordinary member of that committee and for the years when I was chair. Gerald Woonwell was always robust in his questioning of me and of offers, but was at all times absolutely professional. I also recall, in particular, sitting on licensing panels with him, and a particular one was an all-day panel for when we were considering an application from the Southern Bell pub on the corner of Greyhound Road, or whatever it was called in those days. It's changed its name so many times. Like colleagues on the opposition who've also said it, I also recall this sense of the grandiose, his sense of theatre and playing to the audience at meetings, the way he would stand up, glasses off, and speak to the members in the public gallery. In particular, his mock outrage when he received an unexpected response from officers on the planning committee, or when he heard what the administration was doing at the council, something he disagreed with. Councillor Woonwell's passing is yet another addition to the loss of members of the so-called old guard. He was a larger-than-life councillor, and one that one that deserves to be remembered by all of us.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Cowan, you wish to speak?
Well, it's very easy to agree with everything that's been said about Gerald Woonwell. He was a remarkable man, but actually he was a formidable politician. As a newly elected councillor, I remember recoiling into the seat, sometimes in panicked shame, as he would lay punches on the administration, only to see Andy Slaughter knock them back. But to be an opposition leader with such a capable ability to go precisely to the point and to deliver a win on so many occasions is a skill. And if you think about municipal life, you know, many of us go into it. It's not the high politics of Parliament. Your name's unlikely to go down in the history books, but actually, when it works, it makes significant changes to the positive nature of people's lives. And Gerald Woonwell, I think, epitomizes the very best of what it is to be a municipal politician. Andy Slaughter asked me to mention that he thought Gerald Woonwell was not only a formidable opponent, but someone of great integrity. And as we have looked around at the political world all around the globe and see so many people who lack integrity, not talking precisely about the American elections, but I think you can see the many examples that there are. Gerald Woonwell was the antithesis of all of that. So his family should be very proud, because as a public servant, he served the public, and that was his predominant feature. As a Conservative, he served the Conservative Party, and I think made it stronger and much more widely respected in the community. So I know I speak for everyone, having heard the fine speeches from our opposition colleagues, in saying that all of us should be very proud of Gerald Woonwell. He enriched us by his presence in the council chamber, and by his example set a mark for all of us to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Any other speeches? Moving on, it's first I have to inform the council of the death. Oh, remove first. I've moved it. So I have to inform the council of the death of Charlie Trelogan, former councillor and mayor. I would like to invite Councillor Wesley Harcourt, Rory Vaughan, Sally Taylor, and Stephen Cowan to say a few words. Thank you. Starting with Councillor Wesley, you okay with that?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this, it goes without saying, this is just another very sad meeting for me tonight. Two people I'm speaking about who have passed away recently. And it really, really is quite moving to be here and be saying this. I was pleased to have been at the funeral of Charlie Trelogan in August at the Mortlake Cemetery. It gave me a chance to exchange memories and condolences with his family and friends. I've stood before this chamber on quite a number of occasions recently to say a farewell to members of the council who've passed away, such as former councillors Les Wicks, Mike Cartwright, Colin Ahern, Tony Hennessy, and tonight, as we've just heard, councillor Charlie Trelogan, and as we've heard a few minutes ago, Councillor Gerald Woonwell. It really does feel to me like it's marking the end of an era and marking the end of the old guard. I'm having some great difficulty in recalling when I first met Charlie, as he was one of those colleagues who seemed to always have been around. I suppose I first got to know him during the by-election when he was elected to the council in 1998. Even before being elected, Charlie was the go-to person for help and advice on the West Ken estate. I recall campaigning and delivering leaflets from his mobile campaign office, i.e. the back of his black London cab, and going to the Labour Party conference in Blackpool with him the year that Tony Blair was elected Prime Minister. Charlie was my vice chair on the planning committee for a number of years and was a trustee of the CAB, now called Citizens Advice, until he resigned when he became mayor in 2003. I took his place on that board. Charlie became a mayor at a time when council meetings were a little bit more boisterous, shall we say, than they are now. But he did a great job in controlling some of the more volatile members, which only goes to show the respect and regard in which he was held by both sides in this council. After stepping down from the council in 2006, his health deteriorated, and I recall some years later being asked to go down to the town hall reception to see him, where he was trying to explain that he had a meeting with education, but couldn't remember with whom. He was clearly very confused, but as luck would have it, Keith, who worked closely with him in the mayor's office when he was mayor, was able to come, talk to him, calm him down and take him home. Charlie was a very humble man who rarely spoke about his time in the Navy or what he did in the Second World War. This brings me to perhaps my fondest memory of him. Charlie agreed eventually to bring in some photos of himself as a young naval officer and of him serving on HMS Rodney and HMS Victorious during the surrender of the Japanese at the end of the war. Charlie should be rightly remembered for the help and support he gave to the residents of West Kensington and to residents across the borough when he became councillor and in his role as mayor. But we should also remember him as a man of humility, integrity, and with a deep sense of duty. These are attributes that we should not just remember, that we should learn from and use them as a template for how we should conduct ourselves in the future.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Vaughan, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for allowing me to talk a little about Charlie Trelogan tonight. It's obviously with great sadness that we mark his passing, but what a life. 99 years, a naval petty officer, cab driver, councillor, 3 years as mayor and first citizen of this borough. I was lucky to have known Charlie for quite a few years, particularly during his time on the council. I was a mere campaigner at that point, but not one of his colleagues then. But he was clearly very committed to his constituents, as Councillor Harcourt has recalled. Really curious and dedicated to public life when he came to it, particularly, as has been mentioned, on the planning committee, that he served on with Councillors Mike Cartwright, Colin Ahern, and indeed Councillor Wesley Harcourt. They formed I think, a formidable but always interested set of planning committee members, making sure that things were scrutinised in the most appropriate way. So, and that continued even on his time at the council. I think that the four of them would meet in the Salutation pub after some of those meetings to discuss some of the finer points of planning policy. He came obviously to public life actually much later in life. I guess he must have been 72 or 73 when he was elected, which is sort of unusual. So we did get someone who was extremely experienced and had been through a lot of life's rich tapestry. I particularly remember we had a particularly entertaining his 80th birthday celebration as when he was mayor in the mayor's parlour, something that I don't imagine will happen too often in the future. But I think, as has also been mentioned, he was, interestingly, someone deeply rooted in his community, born in Fulham, very much a sort of Fulham boy, I guess, and respected all round, partly because of his long affiliation with the borough, partly for his conduct as a councillor, particularly as the mayor. And indeed, so much so that I was told by Conservative council, I don't know how much to put into this, that had he been re-elected after the 2006 election when the Conservatives took control, they may have kept him on for a year or two as mayor. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I think it did reflect the esteem that he was held with, esteem that was permeated across the council chamber. He was a strong but warm character, and I think he definitely had a humorous side. I remember a DVD from the 2006 election that was put together for the Labour campaign. It does take quite a lot to remember what a DVD is these days, but nonetheless, it was a sort of video that you watched at that time. There's a classic scene of Charlie with the then councillor Charlie Napier visiting the home of a resident and introducing themselves both as Charlies, to which, of course, Charlie came out with the classic line that they were being visited by a pair of Charlies, but I'll leave that there. Wasn't actually true, of course, they were just called Charlie. But anyway, unfortunately, I hadn't really seen Charlie much for many years before his passing, and Councillor Harcourt recalls some of his health issues. But I would obviously like to take this opportunity to thank all of those who cared for him in his final years. He was a remarkable man, a great public servant, and I'm very honoured to have known him, as all of us who did know him will have been. Rest in peace, Charlie.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Taylor, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Charlie was one of the first residents to move on to the West Kensington estate when it was built. He'd even been involved with the original plans, and there was very little Charlie didn't know about the place and those that lived there. I heard the name Charlie all the time when I first moved in, and that was the mid-80s. It was usually the old ladies saying, "I'll tell Charlie," or "I've told Charlie. Charlie's getting it sorted." My very elderly neighbour seemed to have him on speed dial, on a landline, of course. It made him laugh that she once complained to him about trees being planted on the estate. She said, "If I wanted trees, Char, I'd have moved to the country." His muted response to me was, "She's a funny old girl." She was, of course, younger than Charlie. Charlie was the treasurer for West Ken and Gibbs Green TRA throughout the whole campaign to save the homes, a role he took very seriously indeed. He would fastidiously go through receipts and keep the accounts in excellent order. On one occasion, the chairs, I won't mention any names, had completed the big shop for the Christmas party and inadvertently mixed in a packet of disposable razors. Charlie called soon after he received the receipt. He turned up with a 2-foot-long Sainsbury's receipt pointing out the error, which he had circled in red pen. He stood and patiently waited while the £1.26 was paid back in cash. On another occasion, the then council arranged for the TRAs to have their accounts audited by PricewaterhouseCoopers. Two smartly dressed young men turned up to the tenants' hall to be greeted by Charlie, sitting at a table with his two shoe boxes, neatly stuffed with receipts and a pile of checkbook stubs. It quickly became clear that the auditors wanted to leave after 15 minutes, feeling sure that no embezzlement had occurred and pretty visibly shocked at the meagre amount of money that we held. Charlie wasn't having any of it. He insisted that if they had been sent to look for errors or mismanagement, he would make them look at every single receipt, bearing in mind that most of the spends were less than £3. So the auditors were held captive for another couple of hours. Charlie was a night owl. He would stay up late watching political programs, and you knew never to ring him in the mornings. He's the last person I heard answering his phone with Fulham 5290. He would call me in the evenings to say he needed to come round on business. That meant checks needed signing. He always had his pen at the ready. He'd sit down and my husband would say, "Do you want a whiskey, Charlie?" He'd say, "No, I'm not staying." Half an hour later, he would just quietly say, "Now, how about that whiskey like?" He once noted that the playground lights shone way too brightly into our flat. He said, "I'll get those turned off tomorrow." And sure enough, he did. He was always impeccably turned out, a real gentleman. Long before the youth of the day adopted the like 4 times a sentence, Charlie would softly end all sentences with like. When talking about his time in the Navy, he wryly concluded, "Funny really, as I never could swim like." When I got a garage, he was very keen to visit. I later found out that it had been his garage when he was a black cab driver. He would stand in the garage, lost in memories. And one time he looked at the floor and he looked at me. He didn't directly tell me to sweep up the leaves. He just quietly said, "I'll get you a broom." This was classic Charlie. He made an impact by being polite and non-judgmental, but nonetheless held strong opinion. He spent 10 years campaigning to save the estates, and in doing so, got to meet many more people. He was admired and respected by all of us. We've heard how he became unwell, but I'd like to think what he last said to me stands. "You must be coming up for 30 now." Thank you, Charlie. The pleasure was always ours.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Cowan, would you like to speak?
Thank you. Yeah, as you got an idea, if you didn't meet Charlie Trelogan, you're all sitting there thinking, well, we really missed out. If you didn't know Charlie Trelogan as a friend, then you really did miss out. He was a wonderful man who died just short of his 100th birthday. Not that he ever looked old, which is the most bizarre thing about this near octogenarian. It was his continuous youthfulness. And the best of people of a certain age make friends of any age. And so he had many friends from across the age spectrum, something that I know he cherished. For someone like myself, who grew up in the 1970s, watching grainy Second World War movies of heroes who fought against the evil of the Hitler's Nazi Germany or the Japanese Empire, it was a shock to realize I had a friend who had been there in those grainy black and white cafe movie newsreels. He never talked about it much, other than to say he didn't think the medals were very good. He got given when he was decommissioned, and he'd never learnt to swim. But mostly he talked about what was going on in the present. And the present for him was Hammersmith and Fulham. He was a diligent member of a planning committee. He loved Mike Cartwright and Colin Ahern and Wesley. They would all sit there, almost like statues on a mantelpiece in the Salutation pub, all with their respective drinks, providing a timelessness to those years when I look back on it. They were wonderful days in many ways. But to think that Charlie was there throughout our time in administration, it was also to recognise that he was out there for our time in opposition. for us, in those dark days of opposition, sitting in our office, someone would say, Charlie's coming. And he'd stick his head round the door about an hour later because planning committee was on. And again, in the Salutation pub, they would tell stories, or more likely listen to Colin Hearn tell stories. I do want to talk a bit about his Second World War time, because it was remarkable. He volunteered as soon as he could. His family think he volunteered before he was old enough to volunteer. So they suspect he may have not been quite as truthful as he normally was about his age. Posted onto the HMS Rodney, saw action in the North Sea, pursued German U-boats and battleships to protect the fleets, both in the North Atlantic and in the Baltic Sea, and then moved to relieve Allied forces as they landed in North Africa to begin the fight back after so many years of losses on the British side. They relieved Malta and protected that island at its moment of greatest calamity. And if that was not enough, he was then transferred to HMS Victorious, where, joining the USS Third Battle Group, they saw action against the Japanese Empire. The amount of action that young man would have seen would have been considerable by any measure. The fact that it didn't make him in any way a boastful or proud man, it made him even more of a man with humility, is something that I think all of us who have not served can only hold in awe. That was a characteristic he took throughout everything. His last big fight was the saving of the West Kensington and Gibbs Green estates. He was mortified to think that they would be demolished. And when he began to look into the details of that deal, he was horrified to think that this could happen. The last words he spoke to me was to phone me to thank me when the estates were saved. And I'd never quite heard him be in any way as affected as in that call. I saw him angry once. Only once did I see a sort of flare of anger flash momentarily across his eyes. And it's when I confessed I'd got a minicab back from a pub after an evening out with him. He was a passionate defender of the black cab trade. He was a very proud cabbie. He knew London like the back of his hand. He was a Londoner, but as his family told me, he lived in Fulham all his life. He was Fulham through and through. He was a Fulham boy, a Fulham man. He hated the word hero. He was a Fulham veteran. So I know when we look at all the difference he made in his just short of 100 years, for all of us say to everyone who knew him that we too were proud to know Charlie Trelogan. He made a difference in so many different ways to the lives that we all live now. And it is for us an honour to have just known him for the briefest time that we did. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lloyd Harris, you wish to speak.
Thank you. Right, I wasn't expecting this was about Charlie, but I thought I didn't realise that actually our periods actually we sort of overlaid each other, and I didn't realise that it actually stood down in 2006. But what I do remember about him was that he was one of the first people I met in planning. I had no idea what I was doing whatsoever. So I went up to him and I said, well, this is on here. I said, what do I do? So he took me outside and he said, Amanda, this is what you do. And that was fine. I spoke to Gerald later when he turned up and he said, actually, what Charlie has told you is exactly right. So there was no sort of subtleties about what was possible, what was not. This is what you did. And I found it was extremely useful. And I do appreciate that because he didn't have to. But I don't think really that he led me astray. I think we were okay on that score. Just as a mayor, he was terribly effective and he was highly respected. And you knew when he made a ruling that it was based on, it was accurate. Everyone was going to buy into it. And I thought he was a gentleman. I loved his stories about the black cab. But the one thing I would say, we've mentioned the salutation, was that he did occasionally tell stories at the salutation. Okay, it was late at night and Councillor Lillis was with me, but he was quite modest. So you get a little bit out of it. but there was nothing that actually you could probably say in really in mixed company. So it's probably better leaving it alone. But on behalf of the opposition, I would like to pass on my condolences to his family and friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillor. Any other speakers? Nope. In which case, please can we all stand or bow our heads for a minute of silence in their memory. Thank you. Item 5, public questions. I'd like to thank everyone who took the time to submit questions to tonight's meeting. Public question time is limited to 20 minutes. If a question does not receive a reply in the meeting, a written response will be sent and published in the minutes. For ease of reference, I provided a copy of your question for you. The questioners will be called to have an opportunity to ask a brief follow-up question. Question 1, I invite Donald Grant to ask a question to Councillor Sharon Holder, Cabinet Member for Public Realm. Please, can you read your question? Thank you.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for having me. And can I say it was nice to hear both sides of the chamber coming together, paying tribute to the former councillors.
Thank you.
So I'd like to ask the member for Public Realm, when will the cycle lanes on Wandsworth Bridge Road be restored, please?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Grant. Due to the changes in the highway code for cycling, the correct safer cycling position for cyclists is known as the control position. The original markings in Wandsworth Bridge Road were only advisory, and whilst they enabled cyclists to overtake on the inside during traffic queues, it did create safety issues at junctions and the pedestrian islands. As Wandsworth Bridge Road is now 20 miles per hour, interim measures have been installed to get traffic speeds down to the speed limit and improve both cycling and pedestrian safety, with the added benefit of providing amenities to high street businesses. Thank you.
A follow-up question?
Yes, thank you. I mean, I think you'd be lucky to reach 20 miles an hour on Wandsworth Bridge Road most of the time, and it doesn't take a traffic engineer to tell that the removal of the cycle lanes and the imposition of the parklets is actually more dangerous, as they've already proven to be. And I'd like to ask about the imposition of the parklets outside our homes on Wandsworth Bridge Road in place of the cycle lanes. A busy A road.
Sorry, is that the question?
No, that I'm just introducing the question here. It's a busy A road, which has been made even busier by the two LTNs and the ongoing closure of Hammersmith Bridge. I mean, this is despite the leader and the deputy leader at the previous cabinet meeting.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Grant. I have to interrupt you. You must stick to the question. I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm coming to the question. I think we've got plenty of time. Actually, there's only me here tonight, but I'm just saying, introducing the.
Sorry, that doesn't mean you use the 20 minutes. Sorry.
Okay. But I think at the previous cabinet meeting, when the council leader and deputy leader encouraged residents of Wandsworth Bridge Road to become involved in further interventions in Wandsworth Bridge Road and in follow-up correspondence, I would like to ask him, why have we not?
Mr. Grant, could you please get straight to the question, or the cabinet member will get lost with the answer?
Yes, okay. I'm just asking why were these imposed without the community being involved? Is this because the leaders still presiding over the disorganised, chaotic regime described to a tribunal by a former employee?
The cabinet member to provide a response.
Mr. Grant, I was at the meeting when the leader did offer to consult you and other people in the Wandsworth Bridge Road area, or the South Fulham area to be exact, to partake in what was then the Clean Air Neighbourhood programme. And as you're well aware, the programme has been agreed, and the agreement that has been reached with the South Fulham residents has been that we will improve the South Fulham area to fit in with the Clean Air Neighbourhood programme. And that included changes to Wandsworth Bridge Road, changes that were consulted upon, as you're fully aware, on many occasions, including the Wandsworth Bridge Road fairs that we have had during that period. So I'm going to make it clear when I say I don't think that your question is correct. Okay, I think that we have fully demonstrated that we've consulted with the South Fulham Clean Air Neighbourhood residents, and most of which are very happy with the changes that are being made, including, I might add, a number of the businesses who are looking forward to the parklets being erected. I do accept, however, that those parklets have taken longer than originally anticipated, largely because the manufacturers couldn't deliver some of the goods that we wanted at the time, in the time frame that we wanted. But I can assure you, if there are any questions about the introduction of the parklets, other than what has been previously discussed and agreed with the local community, I'm more than happy to answer them when they come up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Grant, for your question.
I think you were right. The question did get lost. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 2, I've been informed that the resident is not able to attend tonight, so a written response will be provided and published in the minutes. And that is the end of public questions. Item 6, committee reports. 6.1, free home care 10 years on. I call on the Deputy Leader, Councillor Sanderson, to introduce and speak on the report.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. 10 years ago, the new Labour administration in Hammersmith and Fulham made history by becoming the only local authority in England to offer free home care to its elderly and disabled residents. It was a bold decision, and one that continues to make a lasting impact on our community. For a decade, this policy has helped thousands of residents receive the support they need to live as independently as possible, staying in the comfort of their own homes, surrounded by familiar faces and cherished memories. In the face of rising costs and pressures on public services, we have been unwavering in our commitment to ensuring that residents in Hammersmith and Fulham don't have to make difficult financial sacrifices or consider selling their home to pay for the care they desperately need. Our borough's values are at the very heart of this policy: compassion, dignity, and a belief in doing things with our residents and not to them. We live in a time when medical advances and improvements in living standards mean that people are living longer than ever before. But with that increased longevity often comes more complex health conditions that require care and support. Whilst this can be costly, it's precisely why we've chosen to invest in our free home care services. By supporting residents to live at home longer with the right support, delivered at the right level and at the right time, we've not only given them dignity and independence, but we also reduce the need for more intensive interventions down the line, whilst also relieving pressure on our care homes and hospitals. This policy is about so much more than just numbers on a balance sheet. It's about our people. It's about ensuring that each and every one of our residents, no matter their background or circumstances, have the opportunity to live a fulfilling life, enabled by receiving the care they need. We couldn't have achieved this without the dedicated and experienced care team and professionals who work tirelessly every day to make sure our residents receive the best possible care, and we owe them a huge debt of gratitude. This success hasn't been achieved in isolation. The strength of our partnerships, including with the NHS, and our collaboration with the third sector has been instrumental in delivering this policy. Together, we've worked to improve the lives of our residents and ensure that every penny spent brings real value to the public. Our free home care services are a shining example of our council core values, creating a compassionate council and being ruthlessly financially efficient in managing our resources. We've always believed that good governance means making choices that are both fiscally responsible and morally just. And today, 10 years on, we can confidently say that we've delivered on that promise. As we look to the future, we remain committed to improving our model of delivery. Our 2022 manifesto set out clear pledges to ensure that the care our residents receive is consistent, well-trained, regular, and tailored to their individual and unique needs. We're so proud of what we've achieved, but we know that there is always more that we can do. This decade-long journey has shown what is possible when we commit to creating a more compassionate, equitable society. And while the challenges of the next 10 years will no doubt be significant, we continue to lead with the values that have made this policy such a success. Together, we built something truly special here in Hammersmith and Fulham, and together we will continue to ensure that every resident has the opportunity to live their life with independence, dignity, and respect. Here's to another decade of care, of innovative thinking and compassion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I've been informed that Councillors Vaughan, Perez, Antonides and Sadiq would like to also speak. Councillor Vaughan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First of all, I'm delighted that we're taking the time tonight to celebrate 10 years of free home care in the borough. The only place in England, and I guess Wales as well, where home care is free. But it's with regret and slightly sad that we aren't actually celebrating 18 years of free home care. The previous Labour administration in, I think, 2005-06, it got rid of charges. Now, of course, you'll remember, as we've discussed already tonight, that 2006 was a local election year. And it was in that election that the Conservatives made great play of the fact that actually it had been their idea to remove charges and that they would not charge for home care if they were elected. Now, if we cast our minds back, they actually were elected in 2006, but it was within a few short months, they were actually reneging on that pledge to keep home care free, introducing charges of about £12 an hour. I think they were going to rise to £12.40. I mean, obviously, home care charges, amongst other things, are part of the cut and thrust of political debate and electioneering. But it was a entirely cynical act. It was baffling, really, completely cynical act, very clearly set out in their 2006 manifesto, that when they took power, they would keep free home care. However, having struck that discordant note, I think we can see out of that cynical act came the genesis, actually, of today's policy. Local disabled residents formed the Hammersmith and Fulham campaign against cuts to protest against that. And we continue to support them and to support free home care. And as we discussed, we're able to introduce it in 2015. But those years of charging illustrated just why we needed free home care. Vulnerable residents, when charging was introduced, were phoning up, asking for their home care packages to be cancelled. I think officers had to dissuade a number of them from making that leap. I think our scrutiny of the policy, I think I worked probably with the leader on it at the time, showed that the costs of actually administering the charging policy were really high relative to the actual revenue that was actually generated. So it was a bit of a false economy in many ways. But I think sort of most importantly, we focused on the real purpose of home care. And part of this is what Councillor Sanderson has already mentioned, the freedom for elderly residents to live independently in their own homes, and the freedom for disabled residents receiving home care to choose, and direct payments to choose how to live their life, but without charging them for those necessary freedoms. And that's really what we should be celebrating today. Regardless of the past, all of us in Hammersmith and Fulham are continuing to ensure that those elderly and disabled residents who need the support continue to have their freedom that they should enjoy without charge. And we can see that there are thousands of them receiving that in tonight's report. And I'd like to thank all of those council officers, campaigners, carers and others who've helped to make this a reality. Hammersmith and Fulham is a beacon for home care in our country. I hope that flame remains alive for the next 10 years. And like all good beacons, helps guide others to the destination of free home care, meaning that we're not the only ones that provide free home care in the future, bringing hope and freedom to those who need the support of good home care services. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Perez, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for calling on me to speak in support of this report. Next year will mark a decade since we implemented a unique and pioneering policy of providing free home care services for elderly and disabled residents, a significant milestone in our borough. Charging disabled and elderly residents for essential support that enables them to stay in their own homes puts people in very difficult situations, having to make the terrible choice between essentials like heating and eating, and whether they're able to get out of bed, wash, dress, get out and about, and see their friends. To date, we have remained the only council in the country to offer this essential service without charge. Over the years, this policy has benefited thousands of our residents, allowing them to live as independently as possible and providing them the dignity of staying in their homes for as long as they can. LBHF approach to not charging comes from a long-standing commitment to working in partnership with disabled people and challenging inequality. Our commitment to working in co-production with residents to shape the services that work for everyone that needs them. I would like to highlight a report launched by the Disability Law Service. The Disability Law Service is a deaf and disabled people's organization that provides free legal advice to disabled people, their family members, and carers. The Disability Law Service also do policy work aimed at improving the lives of disabled people. In July this year, they launched a report titled Ending the Charging System for Non-Residential Care for Disabled Adults in England. The overall purpose of the report is to make the case for the abolition of home care charges and make home care free at the point of use for disabled people in England, as this will enable them to live more independently and have more control over their own lives. From the research, they found that increased home care charges are having a negative effect in the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of disabled adults and their family members. Also, disabled adults are unable to afford their basic needs, such as food and heating, due to home care charges, and are falling deeper into debt. In this report, the Disability Law Service references Hammersmith and Fulham as a leading example for the rest of the country to how it abolished home care charges. The report references the model that we use and urges local councils in England to follow our commitment to social justice and abolish what they call a tax on disability. The research also found that making home care free at the point of use in Hammersmith and Fulham has profound positive outcomes for disabled adult residents. It has provided them with greater financial resources and has alleviated the negative physical and mental health effects associated with these charges. The abolition of home care charges in Hammersmith and Fulham is a prime example of co-production and our commitment to ensuring that disabled individuals live full and independent lives. Our commitment to not charging for care and support goes hand in hand with realizing our independent living vision. Again, a vision that was developed with disabled residents and disabled people organizations. Our vision is about greater choice and greater control and creating the most inclusive and accessible borough for disabled people to live in. I commend the bold steps this administration has taken to prioritize the dignity and independence of disabled residents. Disability Law Service acknowledgement further solidifies our role as a model of compassionate care that balances responsibility with financial efficiency. We believe that we get it right for disabled people, we have a better chance of getting it right for all our residents. I want to commend all those who have made this policy a success. Together, we're setting a standard of compassion and efficiency that we hope across the country will follow by doing things with the residents and not to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Antonides, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As a new candidate knocking on doors of Brook Green in the spring of 2022, ahead of the council elections, I was particularly struck by our policy of free adult social care. I was proud to advocate for the many caring policies that our administration implements, both for me at a personal level and for the constituents that I met. This policy really struck a chord. 4 years prior, in 2018, my mum was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's at the young age of 68. Mum has always been an integral part of our children's lives and helped with my childcare. She would collect our children from school a couple times a week. My youngest boy, Dominic, then aged 6, had fallen over at school and cut his chin. Mum, whom he calls Yaya, asked what happened, and Dominic explained. The next time she picked him up, she asked again, Dominic, what happened to your chin? Frustrated Dominic replied, yeah, I already told you yesterday that I fell down at school. Mum laughed it off, but I could sense the sadness inside her. She knew something wasn't right. In the years since 2018, our family has come to understand the financial, logistical, and emotional stresses of caring for a close family member with Alzheimer's. An illness in the family impacts everyone, not just the individual, especially the sandwich generation that finds itself stretched thin between responsibilities of caring for children and aging parents while working. I expect that many of us here tonight have witnessed a family member, partner, grandparent, close friend suffer from Alzheimer's. A nurse I recently referred to it as a pandemic. The offer of financial care and the support that this policy provides would have been a significant help and relief to us, especially in the early days. However, as my mother is not a resident of Hammersmith and Fulham, that support was not available to us. Luckily, my mother, aided by family, is in a financial position, her care can be provided for. But many residents of London are not in this position. So the provision of free adult social care that this borough provides is an invaluable support. Our unique comprehensive adult social care policy brings support to residents regardless of income so that they can stay in their homes for longer, and each package is tailored to their individual needs. The abolition of charging was brought into effect in Hammersmith and Fulham for the 1st of April in 2015 to coincide with the introduction of the National Care Act 2014, the most significant piece of legislation in the care sector since the introduction of the welfare state in the 1940s. Some residents may require short-term help for post-op recovery, for instance, or help with shopping, etc. Assisting people to stay in their homes for longer not only maintains community links, but helps to alleviate the expense and free space to house residents in social care homes. Loneliness is also increasingly recognised as a significant health and social issue. Communities are becoming more fragmented and extended family networks are less common due to globalisation and trend towards smaller families. Our adult social care policy helps our residents stay connected to the local community. We also commend all the wider social provisions that the council offers, such as family hubs, silver socials, help with community charities, and the Christmas Day dinner celebrations. This administration 10 years ago had the foresight to create this compassionate policy in a time when we are now seeing hospital beds filled with elderly people who should be cared for in their homes. One local NHS junior doctor recently described to us how the national social care crisis has compounded the financial inefficiency of the NHS because it has resulted in patients having to remain in intensive care for prolonged periods because ward beds are being occupied by elderly patients instead of being cared for at home. Our administration has been able to deliver this policy successfully for 10 years because it has maintained its ruthless financial efficiency over the years. This is no small feat in a time of systematic underfunding of local government, where we are seeing councils declaring bankruptcy all over the UK in recent years. I wanted to say a heartfelt thank you to our officers for their dedicated work keeping this policy alive and kicking by scrupulously monitoring and maintaining high standards of care and for striving hard to maintain the choice of happiness over loneliness.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Siddique, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Home care services are vital and recognized by Hammersmith and Fulham Borough as being an essential arm in caring for our residents. We are unique, being the only borough in the country to offer free home care to our residents with the vision of independent living for all. The advances of the medical sciences, treatments, screening programs have enabled people to live longer, which is amazing. But this has led to the recognition of the needs for the increased social care and support of our residents in their older years. Madam Mayor, you, I, and everyone in this room will need to think of this as a part of our reality. Hammersmith and Fulham is the home for approximately 190,000 residents with over 10% age 65 years or older. Next year will significantly signify a decade of free home care services, helping thousands of residents over the years to receive the required support they need, while maintaining their dignity and wishes to live independently in their own homes. Care at homes allows residents to continue to live at home where they are most safe and comfortable in their own home, surrounded by family and friends. This is something important to most people, but may be particularly relevant for older people and those living with dementia or cancer. Many people may live in the same places for a long time, with memories, personal belongings, not wishing to leave their homes. Home care can be provided to fit around one's lifestyle and schedule, empowering our older residents to continue living life the way they choose. The services assist our older residents to live independently without the fear of paying any cost and regain their confidence, rebuild their skills, and increase their independence. How does the home care work? Residents are assessed and based on their requirements and needs. Support is provided, contacted by the council, or some choose their own care arrangements with the personal budget they receive. Residents receive personalized assistance in activities of daily living, including cooking, administration of medicines, washing, dressing, and assistance in movement, helping them to keep with their routine and choices. Emotional support and company have resulted in reduced isolation and improved overall holistic well-being. The home care system also aid in effective resources use within the healthcare system. They alleviate anxiety about bed occupancy of the hospitals and nursing homes to allow them to concentrate on the emergency situations. Furthermore, it can mean less cost compared to the residents and nursing homes that eliminates all overhead expenses in the latter. LHB, London, Hammersmith and Fulham Council has made this free home care policy an important priority and are able to deliver this policy given its financial efficiency in managing financial resources. Well done to Councillor Rovendry for this. The council recognized the major achievements in the delivery of this free home care services for our residents, which is only possible due to the work of the members, staff, public, partners, and care providers concerned with the home care services. Currently, 2,855 Hammersmith and Fulham residents are supported with the social care, with 1,557 receiving home care and 573 residents arranging their own support. Our LBHF borough has very low rate of people entering care homes. as our fundamental home care services allows our residents to remain at home for longer. Finally, I strongly invite the full council to unanimously support the hard work of the members, staff, public partners, care providers in the delivery of the home care services to our valuable residents in this borough. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Is the report noted? Right, thank you. Item 6.2, Hammersmith and Fulham's productivity plan. I call on the Cabinet Member of Finance and Reform, Councillor Reid, to introduce and speak on the report. Thank you.
Formally moved. I can sum up at the end of the discussion if that's easier.
I've been informed that Councillor Daly would like to speak on this item.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would. When my children were first at school, we made a big deal of Saturday nights and having a family time and a family activity. And quite often it was something as simple as watching a film. And one Saturday night, we were sitting down with a carpet picnic ready to watch, and I'm going to think it was probably Frozen because it almost always was. And the broadband wasn't working. Checked a few things, thought, you know what, I'm going to phone BT, I'm going to find out whether it can come back on, and then I'm going to make a decision whether we're going to change and do something else. So I phoned BT, and I was on the phone to BT for a significant amount of time. I started with saying, just let me know whether it's fixable, and if it's not, that's fine. But they kept me on that phone for an hour, and then it began to dawn on me. I wasn't on the phone to BT. I was on the phone to a call center, and their business was keeping me on the phone for as long as possible. And I hung up, and I'm not telling the story because it's unique in any way, just absolutely the opposite. I imagine everybody will recognize this, at least anyone who's ever needed to call a customer services at a bank or a utility or any kind of large service organization. So what was the cost? For me, it was an hour of frustration on the phone and an hour I missed my young family that I won't ever get back. For BT, it was a complete waste of money. It did nothing to reduce the demand for my household that was still there the next day, but it hugely increased the cost for them to respond to that demand. And in the end, they lost my custom. So you could call it a lose-lose situation, but it's depressingly normal. And this terribly costly way of working has been created by incremental needs to find efficiencies, by cost-cutting exercises, and by budget pressures. Now, cutting costs is not wrong per se. We all want to see less household spending on regressive taxes for essential services and more spending in the local economy, because spending in the local economy drives jobs, community, more connection, higher welfare. But the dirty secret that should be shouted from the rooftops is that cutting spending on services doesn't reduce our taxes. Over half of all local authority spending is dictated by demand. Cutting spending on services doesn't reduce the cost of meeting demand. In truth, it's the best way we know to increase it. The council used to think just like BT. Under the Conservative administration, it was all about looking for efficiencies. Officers were required to look at budget sheets like they were a dress pattern, which could be shortened, it could be slimmed without any knock-on effect on Conservative voters. I've spoken before about how the last Conservative administration snipped and chopped away at housing services, cheap materials here, underfunded contracts there. The underlying need doesn't evaporate. By cutting costs here, it drove exponential demand and related costs here. It was a perfect case study in driving what is known as failure demand of the cost of unintended consequences. By understanding that local authorities are service organisations and that the costs are driven by demand, not budgets, this council has been changing how services are run and how savings are made. The focus has been shifting to efficacy rather than efficiency, which has meant heading upstream and working to prevent or reduce demand through we've talked about it, free adult social care, the implementation of an ethical debt policy, free breakfasts in primary schools, support for care leavers, a law enforcement team and a gangs unit, creating a crisis fund, family hubs, a proactive inclusion programme by piloting ways to improve our everyday health from the air that we breathe to the food that we eat, and by investing in housing stock standards and a capital programme. Because better outcomes cost less. These are all ways this administration and our offices are putting people first and cutting failure demand. The change of approach here wasn't obvious and it wasn't accidental. It was planned, intelligent and brave. And now, by using data and AI to predict and forestall demand, this council is planning to improve outcomes at a lower cost than ever. And that's applaudable. And I, for one, would like to extend my gratitude to all the officers working on these initiatives, trialing these approaches and landing real innovation to all our benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Local councils are required by law to balance their budgets every year. Unlike central government, we're not able to recklessly rack up £22 billion of in-year deficits in the run-up to an election. Over the last 14 years, the burden placed on local government has increased exponentially, while the resources available to it have shrunk. Here in Hammersmith and Fulham, our grant has been cut by 54% in real terms since 2010. While demand for council services has increased due to the dismal state of the economy over this time, and Councillor Daly has explained in her excellent speech the impact of this increasing demand. How many organisations can you think of that could deliver the same services today that they did 14 years ago with less than half of the resources? But that's what we're doing here in Hammersmith and Fulham. Not only have we done this, protecting frontline services across the borough, but we've gone further, providing new services for residents that are unique to Hammersmith and Fulham. Services like free home care that we've just discussed. Services like free school meals for children across the borough. The law enforcement team, the innovative gangs units, the most comprehensive network of CCTV cameras across the country, all keeping our streets safe. None of this would have been possible without our commitment to ruthless financial efficiency. And this is vital because it's not our money that we are spending. It's residents' money, it's taxpayers' money. And they expect us to get value for every single penny. That is why we have stripped out £131 million of wasteful spending inherited from the previous administration without a single cut to frontline services. That is why budgets and contracts are subject to heavy scrutiny by the administration. That is why we are consistently reimagining the way that we provide services to make sure that residents are always getting the most bang for their buck. And that is how, at a time when most councils are taking money out of their reserves to balance the books, we are able to run a budget surplus, putting money aside for a rainy day. The productivity plan sets out how this administration is providing more for less, whether that's through transformations in service delivery, through exploiting data and the latest technology, as we'll hear about later, or ensuring that the best and the brightest come to work for Hammersmith and Fulham Council. On that note, I was lucky enough to meet the recent intake of graduates joining the council, joining us in our mission to change the world, starting with this corner of West London. And I'm always blown away by the calibre of recruits that we're able to attract. Now, considering the importance of what is expected of local councils, you would think that central government would be bending over backwards to help. Instead, they've effectively tied our hands behind our back, through cutting our funding and operating in a deeply disorganised manner. For the last 6 years, the local government financial settlement has been just for a single year, often coming in the last days before Parliament rises for recess. How can councils adequately prepare for the future when they don't know what money they will have to spend in the coming year? In scrutiny, the Audit Commission was abolished. as part of a bonfire of the quangos, only to be reinvented a few years later in the form of the Office for Local Government. When councils are able to bid for funding, too often this is from tiny pots of extremely specific grants that are resource intensive to apply for, but not significant enough to make a meaningful difference. In short, for the last 14 years, we've had a government that has seen councils as an afterthought, an opportunity to pass the buck for unpopular spending cuts. We have done our part, running a prudent, productive, ruthlessly financially efficient council, but too often, central government has failed to deliver. I'm glad that this appears to be changing in the form of our new Labour government, and I look forward to working with them for a long, long time to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillor. Is the report noted? Thank you very much. Item 6.3, Youth Justice Plan 2024 to 25. I call on the Deputy Leader, Councillor Sanderson, to move on the report and recommendations.
Thank you. Moved, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I've been informed that Councillor Lang wishes to speak on this item. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Was that?
She wants to speak.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I am delighted to introduce our updated Youth Justice Plan for Hammersmith and Fulham, a plan rooted in our commitment to ensure the safety, security and well-being of all of our young people and the wider community. Our first priority as a council has always been and will continue to be the safety of our residents. But safety doesn't happen in isolation. It requires collaboration across the board. And that's why this Youth Justice Plan takes a unified approach, working hand in hand with our partners in education, health, the police, our voluntary and community sector, and crucially, with our residents. Together, we are working to prevent offending, reduce youth crime, and protect our young people from harm. Our approach is simple but powerful, providing the right services at the right level at the right time. This is the cornerstone of our strategy across people. By intervening early, by listening to our young people, and by offering them the support they need, we aim to break cycles of crime and create pathways to brighter futures. Since the presentation of last year's Youth Justice Plan, our commitment to children's services was recognised earlier this year when Ofsted awarded us an outstanding rating following their inspection in March. In their report, they highlighted that children in Hammersmith and Fulham are receiving excellent services and that our leadership continues to make vital improvements to keep our young people safe. In 2022, our Youth Justice Service was also rated as outstanding by HMIP, who recognised our clear child-first approach and our systemic way of working with children and families. This recognition is a testament to the hard work, dedication, and innovative practices of everyone involved. We are especially proud of Alison Sabarosh, our Head of Youth Justice, who was recently awarded a Butler Trust Award in a fabulous jumpsuit at Buckingham Palace for her outstanding commitment to improving the lives of young people and their families. But these achievements are not the end of the story, they are part of our journey. Our Youth Justice Plan outlines our key objectives as we move forward. They include increasing resilience and reducing vulnerability to keep children out of crime, improving rehabilitation and resettlement pathways, and most importantly, strengthening the voice of our young people. We listen to what our children and young people tell us that they need, and we act on it. Their voices are at the heart of our work, shaping the way we deliver services and the support we provide. As we move forward, we remain focused on tackling serious youth violence as a partnership. Together, we are developing creative solutions, securing additional investment, and ensuring that every young person has the opportunity to live a positive, fulfilling life. Our Youth Justice Plan is about creating a future where every child and young person in Hammersmith and Fulham can flourish. And it's about working together as one community to build a safer, stronger, and kinder borough for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I've been informed Councillor Lang wishes to speak. Is that the case?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to speak briefly in support of Councillor Sanderson and all others involved in this document, as it's a detailed, ambitious and forward-looking Youth Justice Plan 2024-2025 and endorse its mission and how as a council we will, as the document says, work with our partnership agencies and local communities to keep our children and young people safe and support them to reach their full potential. The plan is rightly very much, as it's quoted, child first. Deputy Mayor, didn't someone once say, I might have got this wrong, youth is wasted on the young? Now, I think that could have been Oscar Wilde, I'm not quite sure. Well, that is certainly not the case in Hammersmith and Fulham, because we're always seeing and we're surrounded by evidence of our young people's contribution to our diverse and dynamic community. Just a couple of weeks ago, just over in Lyric Square, on the stage there, young people celebrating Black Culture 365. In our schools and colleges, all good and outstanding, and our outstanding children's services, young people achieving academic and personal success. In our youth centres and family hubs, examples recognised at our vibrant civic honours celebrations earlier this year. And seen here in this chamber, our superb youth mayor and youth council. But, Deputy Mayor, young people have had it hard over the last years of Conservative governments. Austerity, economic incompetence, the cost of living crisis, just to name a few. And of course, all of this has been compounded with the COVID-19 pandemic, which seriously affected young people's education, personal and social development. So I hope we can all support the Youth Justice Plan to, as it says, increase resistance and reduce vulnerability, to increase pathways out of criminality through effective rehabilitation and resettlement, and with early intervention as the key. And that comes through all the time in the document, to tackle disproportionality and to increase inclusive participation. Deputy Mayor, Hammersmith and Fulham Youth Justice Service was rated outstanding in 2022. And I pay tribute to all those involved and continuing to enact this vital work within our communities. And this plan, of course, needs to be seen in conjunction with other Hammersmith and Fulham strategies, including, I'll just name a few, violence against women and girls, anti-hate crime, early intervention strategies. And of course, in addition, this Labour Council's innovative initiatives, such as our Gangs, Violence and Exploitative Unit, and our excellent and very effective law enforcement team. So I trust that we all here, on all sides of the chamber and outside in Hammersmith and Fulham, will actively support and welcome this Youth Justice Plan. And for all of us, including young people, and also on behalf of young people, we will continue to build a stronger, safer, and kinder borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So the question is the report and its recommendations agreed? Thank you. So the recommendations are carried. Item 6.4, digital transformation projects. I call on the Cabinet Member for Finance and Reform, Councillor Reid, to move the report.
Formally moved.
Thank you. I've been informed that Councillor Gerald Verdier, also you'd like to speak? Is that the case?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Our digital transformation aims to improve processes and services delivery for residents as part of our 2023-26 H&F plan. Key objectives include streamlining access to services, reducing digital exclusion, and enhancing internal digital capabilities. The Residents Experience and Access Programme, launched in 2019, has allowed over 10,000 residents to self-serve via 141 forms. Our digital inclusion strategy ensures no one is left behind by focusing on digital skills, device access, and connectivity. Ultimately, this transformation ensures that residents benefit from faster, more inclusive, and innovative services across the borough. But tonight, I also wanted to talk to you about trust. Studies show that societies that are more trustful are also more prosperous. Increasing trust in the UK could see an extra 0.5% annual GDP growth. That's roughly 12 billion extra pounds of wealth created annually. But to borrow words from the song Telephone, trust is like a mirror. You can fix it if it's broke, but you can still see the cracks in that mother-something reflection. Scandal after scandal, trust under the Tories has been shattered. And trust me, when we look at them, every crack is showing. Throughout this time, groups that have been digitally excluded or have chosen to exclude themselves have grown increasingly distrustful of new technologies. We should not and we will not leave them behind. And while the Tories were busy losing public trust, the Europeans overtook us again. Their online safety regulation passed in July 2022, ours in late 2023, and has yet to be implemented. Our smart data bill was on the books for 4 years and fell twice. And all we got was a loose AI white paper because there was no parliamentary majority left. Meanwhile, the EU AI Act came into force last August. How can it be that the evil, undemocratic Soviet empire managed to legislate at twice our speed? I'll tell you why. Because under them, ministerial appointments were a game of musical chairs, where fanaticism mattered more than skill. In 6 years, we've had 7 secretaries of state for tech, who lasted an average 10 months. By contrast, Peter Carl has had responsibility for tech for 13 months, while in opposition and power. In just about 100 days, Labour has accomplished more than they have in 100 months. Today, Peter Carl announced Ofcom would speed up enforcing online child protection rules. We've also begun to consult on actual AI regulation. The Regulation Innovation Office was launched last week to cut red tape, and Labour's Smart Data Bill will be introduced next week. It's as if it travelled from the antiquity to the space age in one election cycle. The British people clearly have recognised what was holding them back and removed it. In conclusion, after nearly a decade of chaos, we have a chance to rebuild trust. Trust in politicians, trust in tech, and trust that there is leadership to protect from harms and harness the benefits of tech. And I would like to thank our residents, the leader and councillorry for the trust they have placed in me. We will not break that mirror. By supporting this motion, you can ensure Hammersmith and Fulham continues to stay ahead of the curve. With your vote, you can help enhance the accessibility of our digital services, provide vital supports to residents, boost efficiency through automation, improve service delivery with AI, and ensure inclusive design that meets the needs of all. I look forward to your support in passing this motion and advancing our borough's digital transformation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rowan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. When I gave my maiden speech 6 years ago, that was on the subject of reforming the public sector. And few areas have seen greater change in that time than the technology that we use every day. Even in that short period, technology has moved on at a lightning pace. In that time, we've had 28 new models of iPhone. Hybrid working has become the norm for many office workers. And NVIDIA, a company that most of us hadn't heard of back in 2018, briefly became the most valuable traded company in the world. Keeping up with modern technology is essential to ensure the council is run as efficiently as possible, is able to provide services in the most effective ways, and enables residents to take full advantages of the services that the council offers. Now, this report covers 3 areas: the Resident Experience and Access Programme, which is transforming the way that the council interacts with residents, streamlining the process through which residents contact the council, and removing silos that can emerge. The Digital Inclusion Strategy, which harnesses the work of the council and voluntary sector to ensure that everyone has the ability and the capacity to access all those services that have migrated online in recent years, and the council's innovative use of data, automation, and artificial intelligence, which is creating a more efficient, joined-up council that is better placed to deal with the issues residents face on a daily basis. So much of the world is now moving online, whether that's accessing your bank account, keeping in touch with friends and relatives, or even doing your weekly shop. In most cases, the easiest way to do any of these things is to go online. As a council, we have always sought to do things with residents rather than to them. And that is why co-producing this work has been so important. It would have been the easiest thing in the world to patronizingly say, older residents struggle to use new technology, so let's carry on doing things the way they've always been done. If an illiterate resident came to the council seeking help, we wouldn't stop writing anything down. We would teach them to read. And this is the approach that we are taking with this bold new digital inclusion strategy, as Councillor Chevot-Verdier has explained in his speech earlier. And I would like to pay tribute to him for all of the work he has done on improving digital inclusion in the borough, and the whole digital accessibility group for their important work, opening up the world to those currently kept offline. The Resident Experience and Access Programme is transforming the relationship between residents and the council. Now, this may come as a shock to some of us, but most residents want to interact with the council as little as possible. If it's registering to vote, paying their council tax, booking basic council services, there's no need to call the council and sit waiting on hold while you're directed to the right department, as Councillor Daly experienced and told us about earlier. Similarly, our excellent, experienced officers don't need to spend their time doing menial administrative work when their time could be freed up to deal with the complex cases that they're capable of solving. So we are streamlining the contact process for residents, creating a single digital 24/7 self-serve route to give residents a high-quality customer service experience when dealing with the council. Finally, I have always said that I don't just want Hammersmith and Fulham to look like a well-run council. I want it to look like the best-run organisations from across our country, with the compassion of institutions like our schools and NHS, the dynamism and efficiency of the best of our private sector, and the innovation and creativity of our world-leading universities. That is why our work on analysing data and harnessing artificial intelligence is so important. No organisation can claim it is serving the public as well as it can if it's not taking full advantage of the technology and data that's available. Failing to do so will see us left behind, becoming irrelevant to the lives of the people that we seek to serve. That is why our business intelligence and digital teams are making such strides across the council, saving money, generating income, and improving the services that residents rely on. We are embracing the benefits of technology and artificial intelligence, improving the quality of services we can provide for residents. We're making the council more accessible for those who need our support. And we are streamlining the way that we operate, saving taxpayers millions of pounds. This is an administration focused on the future and making sure that everybody benefits from our relentless pursuit of progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers? In which case, is the report noted? Thank you. Item 6.5, review of the Constitution. I call on the leader, Councillor Cowan, to move the report and recommendations.
Fully moved.
Is the report and its recommendations agreed? The recommendations are carried. Item 7, special motions. Additional support for low-income pensioners. I call on Councillors Pascal Tulber and Lloyd Harris to move and second.
Formally second.
I call on Councillor Pascal Tulber and followed by Councillor Lloyd Harris to speak on for the opposition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Like many of you here, on the morning of the 5th of July, I was in a drafty conference centre in Olympia. Many on that side of the room so excited about what the new government would do. Lots of breathless talk of social justice and compassion and the grown-ups in the room. So how many of you could have guessed that pretty much the first action of the incoming Labour government was to take an axe to the winter fuel payment? This was despite, throughout the election campaign, reiterating there are no plans to change pensioner benefits. Only pensioners in receipt of means-tested benefits, like pension credit, will now continue to receive payments. Above that, it's gone. To put it in plain English, that means that someone on as little as £12,000 a year will see up to £300 taken away from them and will have to scramble to make both ends meet this winter. £12,000 a year. Hardly great wealth, is it? Now, I know that government is about the allocation of scarce resources. And for what it's worth, there's a decent argument to be made that this is not money you should be spending on the wealthiest pensioners. I would, in all probability, back that. But 12K, less than Sue Gray was earning a month. For people who often need to keep their homes warm because of disability or illness, made worse by the energy price cap rising by 10% this month. We've all knocked at the doors of pensioners who are proud and stoic, but they're also vulnerable and hate to ask or feel their burden. We all know in our heart of hearts, there will be pensioners in our wards who will be affected, and we cannot but fear that there will be marginal cases that will be tragic. I say to the decent people on the other side, is this really what you wanted your government's first move to be? If it is not in your DNA to fight for the weak and the vulnerable, then what are you for? To govern is to choose, and it was a political choice to allocate these scarce resources to give train drivers a 10K bump and, in news last week, give £300 a week bonus for guards willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice of turning up for work 5 days a week. But we as a council can also choose. So tonight, I would like to discuss how the council can help alleviate the real financial hardship in our borough before winter bites. To my mind, there's 4 immediate things we can do. First, understand the scale of the problem and localize which households might require information and assistance, reach out to them directly. Second, launch an awareness campaign to tell pensioners who might be eligible for pension credit but haven't claimed to apply, how to apply, working in tandem with our local and national charities and citizens' advice. Third, to draw up options for direct financial assistance for the most at-risk pensioners, reallocating council funds if needs be, using the full use of the cost of living programme, and indeed the much vaunted surplus. And fourth, use all your campaigning skills to lobby the government against such a low cutoff point, which will cause genuine hardship in the budget, in the borough. There's still time ahead of the budget. You have an MP with you. Will he prioritise pensioners' lives or his political career? And if you want, I'll even give you a hand with the comms. Deputy Mayor, it is not too late to take a compassionate approach and take action that will have a direct and tangible effect on the lives of elderly residents of Hammersmith and Fulham. Even if the government in Westminster does the wrong thing, you don't have to slavishly follow them. You can still do the right thing. And if in doubt, think of the pensioners in this borough who depend on you to do the right thing. To govern is to choose. We've heard today excellent things about compassion for elderly people. And we've also heard some wonderful examples, people I wish I'd known, about acting with integrity. So I say to the administration, just think how many pensioners in this borough depend on you making the right choice, a choice for your residents, rather than for the egos of your representatives in Westminster. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lord-House, would you like to speak?
Thank you very much. Madam Deputy Mayor, the Labour government has managed to turn hope into despair for millions of elderly and vulnerable pensioners with the removal of the winter fuel allowance. You should be embarrassed and actually ashamed of your party's decision. For hundreds of thousands of people, the difference between food and staying warm this winter, this measly £300 will make a potential life-changing difference. We know lives we lost. Even Labour's report of 2017 indicated that 3,850 excess deaths would be recorded that winter alone as a direct result of removing the winter fuel allowance. So why have Labour's values changed? What could possibly be worth sentencing approximately 4,000 people per year to unnecessary deaths? Just a reminder, this is your analysis. While we're on the topic of analysis, why has your government decided not to produce an impact assessment of this policy? Are you worried it would show even greater levels of excess death? Are you worried it would highlight just how little money Labour are prepared to spend to save the life of an elderly person? How can this Labour administration find £10 billion for its trade union mates it has to put elderly people's lives in danger over a £300 per person allowance. I never thought that I would have much in common with Unite's General Secretary, Sharon Graham, but I found myself in wholehearted agreement when she said, and I quote, "Picking the pockets of pensioners is not a tough choice. It is a mistake." And I still agree with her sentiments. Given the council won't take the ethical decision to stand up to this government, I must ask, what is the council going to do to put in place to support these pensioners? The government will save 1.3 billion in 2024 and 1.5 billion in subsequent years by withdrawing this allowance. They say more elderly will be eligible to apply for a means-tested pension credit, which obviously opens up the way to additional benefits for those most in need. Eligibility is a lot of hot air unless it's backed up by a credible plan to drive uptake, which the government had not produced. 1/3 of eligible people have not taken up these pension credits. Given the council hasn't done its user research, I thought I might share some of my observations to the barriers. Lack of communication about pension entitlement. Forms are online. Forms are long and complex with repetitive questions. And the elderly people's sense of pride in accepting what they see as charity. I'm aware the administration is embarrassed by their party's decisions, but you will have to pick up the pieces and find a way of mitigating this disaster. It would be nice if you had the decency to admit this in public. The government has dropped you in it, so all right, it's now on you. What can the residents of Hammersmith and Fulham expect from their Labour Council to help those most in need? I've heard that the council may be thinking of reintroducing warm hubs. So a day in a warm environment, cup of hot tea, friendly face, and then return to a cold house where it's cold enough to see your breath. It's a tragedy that our elderly do not deserve. This is not how affluent countries treat their elderly. Where is the respect for those who over the years have made huge contributions and sacrifices for our country? The Labour Party's had 14 years in opposition. Surely in all that time, you could have come up with a single policy that might benefit the elderly. I can't believe your first policy for the elderly is going to hasten their demise.
Thank you, Councillor. An amendment has been submitted for this motion. I call on Councillor Ree and Harvey to move and second the amendment.
Formally moved.
Second. Thank you.
Mayor,
I beg your pardon?
we have not seen this, and 14F says that report recommendation should be submitted prior to the meeting. We did not receive this prior to the meeting.
No, it's okay. It's actually not illegal to what we're doing. It's fine. We're not breaking the rules, honestly. It's okay. You'll have a moment. We'll give you a moment to read it. Give them a few minutes straight. Give them a few minutes straight. Have you all read it? Okay, I'll give you another minute. So the amendment has been submitted. I call on Councillor Ree and Harvey to move, so which you've done. I call on Councillor Ree, followed by Councillor Harvey to speak for the administration.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I want to congratulate a certain member of the opposition for showing such remarkable restraint over the course of this debate. We've just heard two speeches that almost entirely focus on central government policy, with the most tenuous links to the work that the council is actually doing, which is what this motion is supposed to be about. I know how the opposition feel about discussing things that the council can actually control, despite the fact that none of them actually bothered to speak on any of the reports we heard this evening. So this amendment focuses on what the council is actually doing, not what is going on in Westminster. I'm being facetious, of course. This is an issue that affects the people of Hammersmith and Fulham, so it's absolutely right to discuss it here. But I have to say, I am a little surprised by this sudden concern for pensioners on low incomes that seems to have swept over the opposition. In fact, they were so overcome with grief that they could only manage to bash out a single sentence of their original motion. No analysis of who may be losing out on the payment and whether they need it. No mention of the various ways in which this administration is already helping the most vulnerable residents across the borough. No consideration of the form this additional support should take. So it's up to the administration, once again, to fill in the gaps. Of course, it is right that the winter fuel allowance is means tested. Fraser Nelson, in that radical left-wing publication, The Spectator, tells the story of a millionaire friend of his who buys a bottle of vintage wine every year with his winter fuel allowance to demonstrate how ludicrous it is that taxpayers' money should be given to someone who so clearly doesn't need it. When it was first introduced, a large number of pensioners lived in absolute poverty and could not heat their homes. Due to the substantial and sustained increases in pensions over the Labour government and the triple lock on pensions, which the new government has maintained, the basic pension is now much higher in real terms than when the payment was introduced. While pensioners on average earned 30% less than working people in 1997, today it is just 9% than someone in full-time work. What the motion fails to mention, presumably because the opposition were too busy clutching their pearls to type it out, is that the winter fuel allowance will be kept for those receiving pension credit. Now, these are the pensioners on the lowest incomes, the one that they seem to be referring to in the motion. Now, not everyone who is entitled to pension credit has applied for it. Councillor Pascal Toubre suggests that we write to residents who are entitled to this pension credit. Well, that's already what we're doing. These residents were identified through the better data analysis that we spoke about earlier on in this meeting. Should they apply, they will receive both the pension credit and the winter fuel allowance. Councillor Lloyd Harris asks what we're doing to help elderly residents. Well, one of the biggest worries facing elderly people across the country is how they would be able to cope with the exorbitant cost of care should they become unable to look after themselves. We heard earlier tonight, this administration has, for the last decade, provided this care free of charge. We are the only council in England to do this, and it makes a significant difference to the lives of those who receive it. It's a shame that given the continued opportunity to support this policy over the last decade, they have consistently voted against the funding to continue it. But this is a common theme. We heard nothing from the opposition when the last Tory government decided to end the Household Support Fund, something that the new government has extended. The opposition voted against last year's budget, which included an extra £1 million to support residents through the cost of living crisis. When they were in power, they hiked Meals on Wheels costs by 80% to over £700. And then when we cut these by over 50%, they opposed that as well. Now, Mayor, I'm no cynic. I believe that this is a genuine change in attitude from the party opposite. Despite their previous behaviour, using their position to try and prevent this administration from providing additional support to valuable pensioners, I believe that this is a heartfelt admission that they were wrong. and certainly not some cheap attempt to score political points based on something going on in Westminster. So there should be no reason at all why they can't support this amendment. And I look forward to receiving their support on future measures that the council takes to support low-income residents in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harvey, wish to speak.
Deputy Mayor, it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating to hear the concern over there, because what's really fascinating about it is that you've actually shown no concern for all of the pensioners and elderly people who've been suffering from the past government's policies. And when I think that there are 14 million people in poverty as a consequence of those policies, including within that 14 million are residents from Hammersmith and Fulham. And at no time, I don't ever recall you stepping up and saying, actually, this government, this Conservative government's got it wrong. No, don't remember it. And when I hear you saying, oh my gosh, we know in our heart of hearts, and people in our wars are vulnerable, we need to fight for the weak, but you weren't fighting for them, were you? Not in those last 14 years. And you know what, when you think about the impact of the policies that are introduced, let me just give you some examples. Pension credit for mixed age couples. If you happen to fall in love and meet and live with someone who is younger than you, the Conservative government introduced a policy that said you will be treated as if you were a working age claimant. And that meant that you would not get pension credit. You'd have to claim universal credit. And let me tell you what that is. From £334 down to £154. So a couple who actually could have been getting £334 to help them stay financially stable, keep them out of poverty, suddenly found, because one of them was younger, under pension age, that actually they could only get £154. And not only that, but they could be sanctioned if they didn't meet the work commitments. So don't talk to me about how you're concerned about the most weakest, because you clearly weren't when these policies were being introduced. And it doesn't just stop there. Since 2016, the previous government introduced a rule where they changed pension credit entitlement for savings credit. So if a pensioner, someone had worked, paid in the system, saved a little bit of money, you cut it so they couldn't claim it anymore. And then, as if that's not bad enough, in 2022, you were aware that there were 144,000 pensioners not getting pension credit that could have been. And what you did last year in 2023 was write to 2,700 of those pensioners, leaving over 141,000 of those not knowing that they could get pension credit. So when I hear what you're saying about, residents depend on us to do the right thing, you were most certainly not doing the right thing. Since the Labour government have come into power, what we have seen is a 152% increase in people claiming pension credit. That is 74,000 claims. So those people will get the help they need. Your previous government, your colleagues in the Conservative Party did nothing to help those people. And what I'm pleased to see is that the Labour government are committed to the pension triple lock, helping the most in need. As a council, we are delivering services for our residents, including pensioners. We've got a fuel poverty strategy that we've implemented, and we've been reaching out to pensioners, letting them know what they're entitled to last year and the year before. So we don't take any lectures from you, thank you. And not only are we doing those things, we've also had our winter support schemes, our electric blankets and fuel vouchers to help the most vulnerable. And over the last 10 years, we've invested over £35 million in our third sector, helping thousands of older people. We've done our campaign to reach pensioners. We've supported the lonely and isolated at Christmas, and we've got our free home care. One of my residents shared with me how he'd found it really hard and he'd struggled to manage to work and look after his elderly mother. And through the free home care that we have in our borough, he was able to work and be confident that his mum got help she needed. So I would ask everyone to support the amendment that we've put through because it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I've been informed that Councillors Alfonso, Daly and Brocklebank-Fowler also wish to speak. Councillor Alfonso, would you like to start?
I'd like to reserve my right to speak at this moment.
Thank you. In that case, Councillor Daly, would you like to speak?
I'd like to reserve two, please.
That's fine, thank you. Councillor Brocklebank-Fowler? Fine. Swiftly on, thank you. Are there any other speakers on the amendment? Councillor Tulane.
Thank you very much. There are bits of the amendment that are actually interesting. This council welcomes the new government's commitment to the pension triple lock. This is very good news. Thank you very much for supporting a flagship Conservative policy that was absolutely designed to give dignity to people in their old age. But I mentioned the point of the triple lock because that was designed to keep pension income in line with other increases, in line with inflation, in line with wages. So, you know, actually sort of running at the same pace is not outstandingly impressive. We come back to the root of the problem, which is what is being done practically for these pensioners on not very much money who are above the pension credit threshold, who are in the area, who will not have this money. Now, paragraph 3, this council further notes that the current administration has invested heavily. That's all great, but that was before this happened. I was amused slightly to read the straw man that Councillor Ree read about. I'm glad he reads The Spectator. It's not something that I'm unfamiliar with myself. But we're not talking about millionaires blowing it on Chateau Lafite. In fact, we very explicitly have said, if it's about means testing, probably a good idea not to have millionaires receiving this. This is absolutely fine. But we're talking about the lower income people. What's going to be done with them? So I'm afraid that this amendment is a missed opportunity because you're doing some of the right things, but you're not doing anything additional now. And now is the time when support is needed for these people. And I'm sorry that this has, you know, become so much about what the Conservatives did in 2006, because that won't make anybody's house any warmer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers on the amendment? I now put the amendment to the vote. Oh, Councillor Ree, beg your pardon.
Thank you very much. Just to sum up and come back on a couple of the points raised in the debate. The point of the triple lock isn't to keep up with wages. It's explicitly to not fall below. But the point of the triple lock is there are 3 parts to it. Wages is one of those. There's also inflation and 2.5% as a minimum level. So the triple lock doesn't just keep up with wages. As I said in my speech, if the opposition were listening, the average pensioner income has gone from 30% of a working person in 1997 to just 9% below today. Therefore, the winter fuel allowance is less essential than it was when it was introduced by the last Labour government. I'm glad that he agreed with my point about means testing the winter fuel allowance. I think as a ruthlessly financially efficient council, we have to make the most of every penny. It's important that central government does the same. And I'm glad that we've got a government now who are less reckless with the public finances. Again, Councillor Pascal Toubre says we should be doing things now. We are doing all sorts of things now with this new funding from the winter fuel allowance. From the household support fund. We will be able to spend millions of pounds additionally on helping the most vulnerable residents. That is something we are looking to do now, looking to get the most efficient use of that money so that it can be spread as widely as possible and help as many people as possible. Councillor Harvey is doing excellent work in that area, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we're able to help those people in the future.
Thank you, Councillor. I now put the amendment to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. I'm very quick. I'm hurrying along. Those against? And those not voting? The amendment is carried. Thank you. Now, are there any other speakers on the amendment motion? Councillor Daly?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I would like to start by thanking Councillors Pascu-Tilbury and Lloyd Harris for tabling the original special motion and providing the opportunity to speak to it. Now, you won't find anyone here applauding the removal of winter fuel payments from low-income pensioners. For me, it's testament to the absolute state the Conservatives sunk the UK finances for this to have even been considered. But here we are. We know that pensioners over the age of 66 will continue to receive winter fuel allowance if they receive pension credit, and around 1 million people in the UK are caught in that net. But pension credit is a top-up benefit that will bring a single person's income up to just over £11,000. And winter fuel allowance offers an additional £200 on top, not 300. That's for couples. These are not generous numbers. Regardless of whether someone qualifies for pension credit or not, no one should be unable to heat their homes this winter. Here in our borough, we have pensioners with recently depleted savings living in old, drafty, under-insulated properties that are expensive to heat. A particular risk of people who are unwell, perhaps with a chronic lung or heart condition, whom living in a cold home is downright dangerous. And those that are disabled that have additional needs for energy. On average, disabled people need to spend an additional £634 a year on energy, not 200. If you're on a low income, and even if you don't qualify for pension credit, losing £200 is significant, and people must be worrying about how they will get through the winter. Councillor Pascu-Tilbury claims that nothing is being done now, but that's a huge misunderstanding. There are both national and local pots to help residents. At national level, there are personal independent payments, PIPs. There's attendance allowance, and not enough people claim this, even though it's worth over £3,700 a year. There's housing benefit, there's carers allowance, and we've heard from councillors Ree and Harvey about the work being undertaken locally to roll out our financial inclusion initiative to increase uptake of these benefits. We know how to do this because we had to do this during the Conservative cost of living crisis. Our older residents are also targeted with a winter ready home scheme, winter support fund, fuel energy support, and council tax support scheme. The government has anticipated an increase in need for local welfare funding and directly funded our housing support and crisis prevention funds. The help and the money is here in the borough, and we are signposting and referring people to it now. We are blessed that we have free adult social care here, as many of the residents affected by the withdrawal of the allowance regularly see carers in their home. And I hope councillors Pascu-Tilbury and Lloyd Harris are reassured that no pensioners should or need to go without heating this winter. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Any other speakers? Any other speakers? Oh, well. I now call on Councillor Pascu-Tilbury to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have had a useful and substantive debate. I particularly thank Councillor Daly for her excellent contribution to the speech. It is good that certain things are being done. It is a slight, I think, failure of communication that there is so many very, very complex areas where there's a tiny bit of a pot here and a tiny bit of a pot there. We need to do a hell of a lot more about signposting this, and because people are genuinely very, very worried. You know, they read all these things, they see the money being taken away. It is still, to me, incredibly worrying that this money is being taken away, and I think we find common ground on that. But it is a shame that we have not been able to react more strongly to what has been done. This is not money that needed to be cut for these people on a poorer, on a lower income. you know, do it at 45K a year, do it at 100,000 a year, fine, but don't do it at 12. It is these people that we are unfortunately not doing enough to support. And I'd welcome everyone to come together to support them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now the big question, is the amended motion agreed? No. I now put the amended motion to the vote.
Name.
Sorry, just bear with us for a moment, please. Hey, everybody, we're ready. Would you all please calm down? Right. And I'll put it to vote. Those in favour. So you're going to call names.
Will councillors please indicate?
Councillors, please.
Will
Time to
councillors
focus.
please indicate how they wish to vote on the amended motion? Councillor Alexander. Councillor Antonides. Councillor Chafop-Verviers.
For.
Councillor Collins. Councillor Cowan.
For.
Councillor Daly.
For.
Councillor Harcourt. Councillor Harvey. Councillor Holder. Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Jones. Councillor Kwan. Sorry. Councillor Lang. Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Miri.
For.
Councillor Nwabe. Councillor Patel. Councillor Perez. Councillor Kwam.
For.
Councillor Ree.
For.
Councillor Richardson. Councillor Rowbottom.
For.
Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Schmidt. Councillor Sadiq.
For.
Councillor Suslis.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
For.
Councillor Trey.
For.
Councillor Ume Francis. Councillor Vaughan.
For.
Councillor Walsh. I think that should, in case we've got a number of absentees, so I'm just working through the list. Councillor Afonso.
Against.
Councillor Afzal Khan.
Against.
Councillor Boland.
Against.
Councillor Brockbank Fowler.
Against.
Councillor Dinsmore.
Against.
Councillor Lloyd Harris.
Against.
Councillor Pascal Taubert.
Against.
Councillor Stanton.
So 430 against 8.
Okay. So 4 is 30 and against 8. I declare the amended motion carried.
Deputy Mayor, under Standing Order 15E3, I ask that the remaining special motions be taken in the following order: 4, 2, and 3.
Thank you.
I formally second.
Thank you. Is this agreed? Thank you. So special motion 4, building a stronger, safer and kinder borough. I call on councillors Harvey and Sulu to move and second.
Moved.
Formally seconded.
I call on councillors Harvey and Sulu to speak for the administration.
Deputy Mayor, in Hammersmith and Fulham, we want to build a stronger, safer and kinder borough for everyone. And we know that across the borough, there are women and girls, boys and men who experience harassment, sexual abuse and all sorts of things. And we know that it disproportionately affects women. In July 2024, so this year, the National Police Chiefs Council reported that there is an epidemic of violence against women and girls. They said that there's 3,000 crimes reported every single day. They also said that we're in a national emergency. I'm so pleased that our new Labour government are committed to tackling violence against women and girls. And in Hammersmith and Fulham, we take seriously the safety of women and girls. We have invested millions into our community safety teams and services, including the Angelo Partnership, Advance and Refuge, among many others. Earlier in this year, we carried out a public consultation with residents, and we asked them to let us know their views on introducing a public spaces protection order. And that's against sexual harassment. And I was pleased to see that the overwhelming majority of people that completed that consultation actually agreed that we should have a public spaces protection order to make it an offence if someone commits sexual harassment. So in July, we introduced our public spaces protection order, and we've been running a campaign of no more to sexual harassment. And hopefully you will see that posters around the borough and some of our campaigns strategy around that. And that builds into the work that we're doing around our violence against women and girls strategy that's been in place for a number of years. Our strategy enables us to work across different directorates in the council, alongside our residents doing co-production and working with them to make our services better, but also with partners in the voluntary sector, as well as the police, the probation service, the youth council, football clubs, and businesses as well. So we're doing a huge amount of work to improve the public realm for our residents and to make it safer. A couple of weeks ago, I visited Fulham and I met a member from the Fulham bid, and she introduced me to some women that work in different shops in Fulham. And what I heard was some really horrendous stories, and I'd like to share them with you because it goes to show that it happens whether you're walking in the street or just simply going about your business or trying to do your job. So one shop assistant told me how, because she had refused to engage with someone who's been very abusive to her, he threatened to rape her. So while she was carrying out her job, she was threatened with rape. Another person told me that she told a man he had to leave the shop, and in response to that, he left the shop and he walked outside and he started urinating against the shop. It's the sort of response you would just not expect by your workplace. And I also heard how another shop assistant had a man exposing himself through the window to her. Really horrendous, disgusting behavior by these men. And it's just not acceptable. We shouldn't tolerate it. So I'm so pleased that, you know, Hammersmith and Fulham has a really strong leadership, great leadership from Cabinet, and being able to invest millions of pounds into making our community safer, to tackle violence against women and girls and keep our borough safe for everyone. So We have our Let's team, we have the CCTV, the greatest amount across the country, our Gangs and Violence Exploitation Unit, and our special DV courts, and brilliant officers working to keep women and girls safe. So can I ask everyone to support this motion, to step up and call out sexual harassment when you see it? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sulu, you wish to speak?
I reserve my right to speak later in the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. I have been informed that Councillors Dinsmore, Daly and Afzal Khan also wish to speak. Is that the case?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I support this special motion and share the same indignation as Councillor Harvey in relation to those horrendous events that she described, which nobody should have to put up with in their workplace or otherwise. A lot of the initiatives are great. The gangs unit is great and it involves additional police. And you all know what I'm going to say next. There is a better blend here with the LET, with the CCTV, to have more police on the beat, which this borough could allocate resources towards. There is violent, abusive crimes, hard sexual crimes that cannot be fixed with a fixed penalty notice. You need powers of arrest, you need powers of search, you need powers to enter houses, searching for weapons, solving domestic abuse. So the only point that I would say is lots of good work being done, but there needs to be more done, there needs to be more police. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Daly, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I wish to speak. I'm not sure anybody else wants to hear from me again. I used to walk home from the tube on my own with my hand in a fist and a key gripped between my fingers. It's a basic self-defense tool that we're all sort of taught. Otherwise, it's always included wearing trainers and traveling light. My experience of being alone outdoors, both at night and sometimes in daylight, is an ever-present threat of unwelcome, frightening, or disquieting behavior from men, usually lone men, but not always. I believed that by the time I had children, this would be a thing of the past, but I was so wrong. A 13-year-old friend of my daughter's was followed all the way home from a school in Fulham last year. She was very frightened. I mean, of course she was, but this wasn't an isolated incident. Research tells us half of all schoolgirls have experienced public sexual harassment whilst wearing school uniform, including being wolf whistled, stared at, catcalled, followed, and groped. Less than 1% of all incidences are ever reported. And a majority of women and girls in the UK and in our borough have experienced sexual harassment in public spaces. Around 70%, in fact, rising to 97% of women aged 18 to 24, and with a breadth of age starting from children as young as 8. We know that men who target women and girls don't start off with rape or murder. We know they start with harassing us on the streets and build their confidence there, following us, taking photos, stalking, flashing, and 100 other ways they get a sexual kick out of threatening us. These are the training grounds for our worst offenders. This was the training ground for the Met officer who kidnapped, raped, and murdered Sarah Everard. Violence against women and girls has been a top priority for SNTs in many of our wards, but what tools do they actually have? A young woman in my ward reported a man a while back for harassment. Nothing changed for him, but it did for her, because now he hangs out near her building. He just hangs out there and he watches her, sometimes calling out to her. He knows his behavior is hostile and frightening, and he thinks he's untouchable by law enforcement. Women and girls want to move freely in public without the fear of being intimidated or harassed, and that is not a big ask. That we, our sisters, wives, daughters, and mothers need is a law that makes sexual harassment illegal. But that's not just a matter of law enforcement, it's a matter of culture. What can we do to change the attitude of men and boys who see harassing women as fun? What will start to turn the dial on this culture of my daughter and her friends being seen as fair game? I'm a huge supporter of this public space protection order, which makes sex-based street harassment an offence, because it finally draws a line in the sand. It's a line that we are overtly telling men and boys they should not cross, they cannot cross. It should embolden women and girls to report harassment, and it will empower law enforcement to take action against men who cross that line. The SNT in my ward have welcomed the PSPO as a tool to help my resident. Her harasser knows his behaviour is morally reprehensible, and I am very much looking forward to the moment he's handed a fine and finds out that he isn't untouchable anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Afzal Khan, would you like to speak?
Good evening, Mayor. The tragic cases of violence against women and girls have highlighted how deeply rooted the issues of abuse and misogyny are in our society. The Conservative government responded with urgency, implementing measures to tackle violence, reform criminal justice, and change the culture surrounding women's safety. One of the key actions taken by the Conservative government was the introduction of the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, first introduced in 2010, and it was refreshed in 2021 to deliver tougher sentences for sexual assault and stalking protection orders. The Domestic Abuse Act of 2021 is a landmark legislation which introduced new powers like the criminalization of non-fatal strangulation and the extension of the revenge porn law to include the threat to share intimate images. It also introduced domestic abuse protection notices and orders to provide victims with immediate protection. The Conservative government committed funding to support victims, including £125 million for safe accommodation services and improved 24/7 rape and sexual violence support. It also delivered criminal justice reform by introducing end-to-end rape review and specialist rape courts. The Conservative government started the Safer Streets Fund initiative with a £120 million investment to provide funding for local areas to invest in better lighting, CCTV, and neighbourhood patrols to prevent violence and harassment. The Conservative government implemented the nighttime safety charters with businesses, bars, and venues signing up to create safer environments for women and ensure staff are trained to intervene if necessary. The Conservative government's Protection from Sex-Based Harassment in Public Act 2023 criminalized street harassment such as catcalling, following someone, and making offensive gestures. The law introduced harsher sentences for sex-based harassment, with penalties increased to up to 2 years in prison. The Conservative government expanded Operation Soteria nationally in 2023, which is a pioneering police program focused on improving the investigation of rape and sexual offences. Specialized training was rolled out across police forces, resulting in higher arrest, charge, and prosecution rates for sexual offenders. More than 4,500 police officers received this mandatory training with a victim-centered approach to better handle rape and sexual offences, exceeding government's targets. Madam Mayor, legislation alone is not enough. Changing the culture that enables violence and harassment is key. The Conservative government introduced education and awareness campaigns like the Enough campaign to encourage men and boys to recognize and challenge harmful attitudes and behaviors towards women. And 2, relationships and sex education was made mandatory in schools to ensure that young people grow up with a better understanding of consent, respect, and healthy relationships, laying the foundation for a more respectful society. The Conservative government also provided vital support to over 4.2 million people globally between April 2021 and March 2023 to combat gender-based violence. This aid was pivotal in tackling domestic abuse, child marriage, female genital mutilation, and supporting survivors of violence in countries like Bangladesh, South Sudan, Zimbabwe, and Syria. I am very proud of the work the Conservative government
did for the safety of women. And I'm very pleased to note that the current administration has embraced the positive and effective steps to deliver women's safety and are trying to embed it into this wonderful borough's systems and procedures. I thank Councillor Harvey and Councillor Susslers for putting forward this motion, and I encourage you all to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Khan?
Yeah, I just want to commend my colleague, Councillor Harvey, and indeed all the speakers on their fine insights that have gone to the very heart of much that's wrong in modern society and where we need to draw a new line on what is acceptable and what is not, and what is criminal and what needs to be caught and captured. I just wanted to take up some of the points that we've heard tonight. And in particular, I want to start by thanking the opposition for their support of this motion. It is appreciated not just by us in the administration. I think it's important that all our residents see us stand together as we begin to tackle crime. And that one voice should resonate very forcefully because it is an endemic problem that we have had for a very long time. Crime in many ways is a sign of a dysfunctional society, and that dysfunctionality often requires a sophisticated response as well as a firm response. For us, it is notable that virtually all prosecutions happen because they are seen on CCTV. That tells you something about the nature of the criminal justice system, but it also tells you, because it tells you about the requirements that are needed in order to catch and prosecute people. Within that, we have seen a depleted police force across England significantly over the last decade. And indeed, whilst, as the last speaker said, the former government did do some good things, as my colleague, Councillor Ree, has pointed out throughout this meeting, it does take putting the money where your mouth is if you're going to take the measures to be tough on crime and its causes. And in particular, I want to come back on the law enforcement point. I can't work out every time that point is made whether the speaker has sincerely misunderstood the importance of a law enforcement team or is just making cheap political points. Firstly, the new Labour government will, because it's of its emphasis on cracking down on crime, reinstate community policing and put extra police on the streets. We're in talks with both the Mayor and the central government to look at that. But the bit we're responsible for in Hammersmith and Fulham, we have to have complete control. And the law enforcement team are a model that's being copied around the country, because what they do is they provide a very visible force for law on the street, and we can control them in conjunction with our CTV better than we can the police. And that has meant that we've had some of the most effective policing in London because of that combination of the law enforcement team working with the police, working with CCTV, working with the gangs unit, and all the sophisticated services. If we had more money, we would not put it into police. It would be an ignorant and ridiculous thing to do. We would put it into even greater numbers of law enforcement officers and even greater numbers of intelligent officers looking at how we infiltrate the causes of crime. That's the way forward. And if every time someone says, and I'm glad that the last speaker, the speaker on the opposite benches, made the point now that they support the law enforcement team. Previously, they asked us to remove the money and give it to the police, which would have been negligent. So it's good that you no longer argue for the destruction of the law enforcement team, but want to keep it as it is. But it is still naive to argue that the law enforcement team is not as effective as the police. It is as effective as the police because it works with the police, with CTV and all the other services. If you're going to be tough on crime, it's more than just words. It is a robust and comprehensive approach. As the global economy becomes more and ever closer and globalized, crime, as organized as it is, becomes more effective. Within our first 3 months of our law enforcement team, we had nearly 600 County Lines gang members arrested across the UK. That's the nature of crime today. It requires a sophisticated approach, That's what you get from this Labour administration. It would be soft on crime to cut the law enforcement team, as we heard from the Conservatives, and I ask them to properly think that through, look at the evidence, and stop trying to undermine the law enforcement team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers? Any speakers? In that case, I now call on Councillor Harvey to sum up, please.
Deputy Mayor, just to sum up and to follow on from Councillor Cowan, it was very disappointing because this motion is not political in any sense, that there's no attack on the Conservatives. So it was actually really disappointing to hear those comments about investing in more police and sort of criticism levelled around the LET team. The LET team are out 24/7. And also, I've said before in this chamber about how the LET officers have actually intervened when a woman was almost being raped in a park in the evening. We all know, because we've said it so many times here, that the police get taken away to the other boroughs. And as Councillor Cowan has said, you know, with our LET team, we have complete control of what they do. Our own superintendent of community safety, Craig Knight, has actually said you get more bang for your buck with the LET team, and that they are vital intelligence. So we won't be taking the advice from over there. It's really important that our LET team do the amazing work that they do, and we really value them. I'd like to say that we're doing a huge amount of work in our community safety team and a huge amount of work to protect everyone in our borough. And with our CCTV, it's enabled us to provide that data, important intelligence to the police, and they've been able to prosecute over 600 people based on the data that our CCTVs have provided, collecting, gathering evidence. And we've also been able to use it in all manner of ways to make people feel much safer, and women and girls. And I'm really pleased that we've got this PSPO. It is borough-wide and it applies throughout the whole borough. And it also extends, so it's not just against sexual harassment to women and girls, but it will tackle transphobia, it will tackle homophobia. So it's a very robust, broad PSPO to tackle really horrible behaviours that people conduct themselves in. And as Councillor Daly said, you know, when we're looking at the violence against women and girls, this is someone's mother, someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's auntie, someone's friend. These women are people that go about their day and should have a right to go about their day, should be able to go to school and leave school and go home safely, should not feel unsafe. So it's a real welcome that we have the PSPO, and I'm really pleased to say that we've actually already issued someone a fine for catcalling a woman, and that woman was so pleased that we did that. And she said she was really grateful that in Hammersmith, Fulham, we are taking women and girls' safety seriously. So I would ask everyone to support the motion. Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank you, Councillor.
Deputy Mayor, can I just have a point of clarification under 15D2? I was mentioned my name.
Deputy Mayor, it's not the purpose of that.
No, sorry. It was said in my speech that I criticised the LET, which I did not.
But your name wasn't mentioned.
I said pointed at me and said the speaker said that I criticised the only person to speak. I was the only person on this bench to speak. Who else could it have been?
I'm going to refuse. I'm so sorry.
Really?
I'm refusing.
That's incredible.
Is the motion agreed? Everyone agrees? Thank you. I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Right. Special motion 2, unlocking the benefits of decarbonisation in Hammersmith and Fulham. I call on councillors Melton and Miri to move and second.
Moved.
Seconded.
I call on councillors Melton and Miri to speak for the administrations. Councillor Melton, would you like to start?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. For 14 long years, we've been relentlessly force-fed a diet of climate misinformation and false net zero choices. The last government saw political advantage in repeatedly pitting prosperity against decarbonisation, suggesting that we must choose between energy security and clean, breathable air, between affordability and survivability. Every single one of these was a false binary, an artificially constructed dilemma that denied the truth that decarbonisation is a win-win for the UK. Decarbonisation, far from being a drag on UK prosperity, is driving sustained economic growth. According to the former Conservative Minister Chris Skidmore, green industries contributed over 41 billion to the UK economy last year. That's over 4 times the 10 billion that North Sea oil and gas revenues delivered in the same period. Published on Monday, the Labour government's industrial strategy green paper highlighted the low carbon technology sector, currently employing over 500,000 people in the UK, as one of the 8 powering high-wage, high-skilled growth across the economy. Hammersmith and Fulham is, of course, at the forefront of this net zero revolution, with the White City Innovation District helping to commercialise a range of low-carbon technologies and innovations, from RFC Power's pioneering battery technologies to Airhive's geothermal tech. One of the most pernicious and mendacious net zero falsehoods is the suggestion that we cannot afford it, or that the money would be better spent elsewhere. Sadly, for the modern snake oil salespeople who promote this deceit, the numbers just don't add up. In the wake of conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East, the average price of electricity generated from burning gas is set to remain well over 120 pounds per megawatt hour for years to come. That's double the 61 pounds for solar or the 64 for wind generation, with electricity prices from renewables forecast to fall even further as GB Energy quadruples offshore wind generation, trebles solar, and doubles onshore wind. The independent analysis of think tank Ember indicates that the average UK household, including Hammersmith and Fulham residents, will see a reduction of £400 in their energy bills by the end of the decade as a direct result of our Clean Power 2030 mission. Once again, Hammersmith and Fulham is in the vanguard with the launch of our community energy scheme last month. 270 solar panels are now on the roof of the Jack Tizard School in White City, and are shaving over £2,000 off the school's energy bills and powering up to 300 local homes. The politics of easy answers peddled by the former Prime Minister argued that global gas prices are rising and we should simply produce more hydrocarbons to ensure our security. The controversial Rosebank oil field, which previous government granted fracking specialist Equinor the license to exploit, contains only 10% gas, equivalent to about 0.7% of the UK's current gas consumption. Even if we followed the recently unemployed Jacob Rees-Mogg's advice that we extract every drop of oil and gas from the North Sea, we will never have sufficient to even cover our current needs, condemning us to soaring electricity prices and deeper reliance upon the whims of an increasingly volatile global energy market. But there is another way. By building renewable generation right here, we will liberate ourselves from the influence of autocratic petrostates and secure our own net zero future. UCL research tragically highlights that almost 49,000 Britons died prematurely last year as a result of poor air quality. That's sadly over 100 lives cut short in Hammersmith and Fulham every year. The new government's pledge to reinstate the 2030 ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles will be a clear signal to motorists that their next vehicle should be electric. Here in Hammersmith and Fulham, we're doing our bit to give motorists the confidence to go electric, with the highest number of EV chargers of any borough in London, with over 2,800 spread across the borough. Every home and office in our community is within 400 metres of a charging point. But that's not all. To complement the high-tech solutions, we're also going back to nature by planting 4 tiny forests, each the size of a tennis court, with over 600 native species of trees. These forests will provide a growing carbon sink, filtering the local air of particulates and begin to restore biodiversity across the borough. Let's be crystal clear. Decarbonisation is not optional. It's not nice to have. It's not green crap. Under the new Labour government, We're harnessing decarbonisation to reshape our nation, to be the engine of economic growth, the guarantor of national security, and a key part of the restoration of public health. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Murray, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. At 6 p.m. on Monday, 30th of September, 2024, a 142-year chapter of our history came to an end. A chapter of industry, of dark satanic mills, of pollution, and of production. A chapter that came to a close when Britain's last coal-fired power plant closed its doors. 142 years ago, in London, the world's first coal-fired power plant opened. We were the birthplace of coal power. By 1920, almost 100% of Britain's electricity was generated by coal, a legacy of the Industrial Revolution. But now, one industrial revolution has given way to another, a green one, with a government that embraces it and sees the many opportunities ahead. Closing the last coal-fired power plant in Britain may have seemed more like an inevitability in recent years, but it's just one of many actions the new government has taken to not just show determination, but actually follow through. The ban on onshore wind was born out of a misguided notion of aesthetics, of preserving the British countryside. But what's more damaging to our countryside, our water, our air, our environment, than fossil fuel generated power? Did the last government think it was okay to pollute our countryside to oblivion, but the sight of a few wind farms was a step too far? The removal of that ban shows the seriousness of the new government, and the introduction of strategic planning for a number of key environmental and infrastructure projects shows they're willing to do what's right for the greater good, already having approved 1.35 gigawatts of solar generation. And what position would we have been in if the Tories had won the election? A boost to fossil fuels, allegedly yielding short-term benefits, but entirely negative long-term damage. Locally, in our own small patch of the world, we've also been taking measures to tackle this problem head-on. The South Fulham Clean Air neighbourhood, which was mentioned earlier, has delivered an estimated 1.9 tonne reduction in carbon emissions and 1.35 kilograms less nitrogen oxide in the air. We have an ambition to achieve net zero by 2030 and are marshalling all the resources of the council to achieve this, radically adapting our buildings, resources, and strategic partnerships to ensure we hit this target. In planning and development, we're ensuring a new generation of passive house homes are built, setting an example for sustainability and ecological excellence. But we're also pressing ahead with our low carbon procurement policy, our trailblazing green investment fund, and we're driving forward with our air quality action plan, no pun intended. All of this is not just the right thing to do for ecological and environmental reasons, but will also make Hammersmith and Fulham a nicer place to live, increasing quality of life. These are social and economic justice issues too. There's always more to do, but with a government that's just as committed as this council in decarbonising and reaching net zero, the wind is in our sails, no pun intended. So that a new chapter of British history can begin, one that makes more green and more pleasant this entire land. Thank you.
Oh. Thank you, Councillor. I've been informed that Councillors Afonso, Harcourt, Dinsmore and Trehi also wish to speak, bearing in mind the time is nigh.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Madam Deputy Mayor, under Conservative leadership, the UK became a global leader in clean energy. We have decarbonised faster than any major economy, becoming the first to halve emissions against the 1990 baseline. The UK has developed more offshore wind capacity than any country except China, and has tripled renewable energy generation between 2012 and 2022. Thanks to conservative market-based policies, we have encouraged significant private investment in the green economy. In fact, the UK managed to halve its emissions while growing the economy by 79%, a clear testament to the Conservative vision that economic growth and environmental sustainability can go hand in hand. Madam Deputy Mayor, I agree. It is crucial that we unlock the full benefits of decarbonisation, as the energy transition has the potential to create up to 725,000 new jobs and bring 70 billion in economic benefits across the UK. Those green jobs are 1.7 times more productive, generating almost 50,000 in added value per green employee. I applaud some of the administration's decarbonisation projects. However, the new Labour government's approach is misguided. Madam Deputy Mayor, the formation of GB Energy is a heinous misstep by this Labour government. Labour's emphasis on state ownership threatens to crowd out private investment and squander taxpayers' money. It risks duplicating efforts of existing institutions like the UK Investment Bank, established by the Conservatives, which already supports renewable energy projects and has mobilised 9.6 billion in private funding. It is market-based solutions combined with a streamlined planning system that will allow us to expand the clean energy at a lower cost and with greater efficiency. Furthermore, the Clean Power 2030 Advisory Commission's action plan states its aim as to decarbonise the electricity grid, helping protect bill payers from volatile gas prices and strengthening Britain's energy security. Madam Deputy Mayor, this can only be achieved efficiently through market-based solutions. The National Wealth Fund is allegedly to be partially funded by a so-called new windfall tax on oil and gas firms, but the Labour government can't provide us with any real detail. The Labour government has already revealed cracks in the National Wealth Fund by cutting the allocated budget from 7.3 billion to 5.8. The Labour government has lacked clarity of where the money will come from and how this impact will affect people across the UK, and including here in Hammersmith and Fulham. This step back so early into Labour's time in government not only shows their inability to govern, turns out it's harder than it looks, but shakes the confidence of private investors who want to invest in the UK to enable market-led decarbonisation. Madam Deputy Mayor, another example of this misguided approach is wind, which was pushed through without consultation and consideration of local communities that will be most impacted. Furthermore, the approval of the 1.35 gigawatts of solar generation by the Labour government within days of the 2024 general election shows their lack of respect for the opinion of local communities and the impact the solar farms will have on them. Planning decisions such as these should be taken by local councils who represent local people, not by Ed Miliband. And I sincerely doubt he had the time to thoroughly assess the implications. And as for the closure of the last coal-fired power station, the phase out of coal was announced by Amber Rudd in 2015 and is testament to the Conservative Party's commitment to decarbonisation. It is clear that decarbonisation is a Conservative mission that can and should be led by the market, and the government should enable it through pro-market reforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harcourt, do you still wish to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Bearing in mind, you've only got a moment or two.
Yes, it's a sad fact that an issue as important as that, that's affecting the entire world, is left to the final couple of minutes, but there we go. Anyway, as I'm sure I've said before, and I'm going to repeat it again over here, climate change is probably the most important factor, issue, challenge facing the world at the moment. I'm sure I don't really need to remind many of you about the severe storms we had last winter, the heat waves across Europe and elsewhere. And this summer, according to the Copernicus Climate Change Service, was globally the hottest ever on record. More recently, in the last few days, we've seen the increased intensity of hurricanes in the Caribbean, which are driven by higher than ever ocean temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. Scientists are now warning that the 4 tipping points after which climate change becomes irreversible are now within reach, with some even suggesting that some of these tipping points may already have been breached. The International Energy Agency stated this year that clean energy investment will top $2 trillion, with the vast majority being spent on solar, wind, and battery technologies. New technologies such as carbon capture and nuclear fusion continue to be developed. However, time is running out as we experienced unprecedented heat in India and Europe this summer, wildfires and increased flooding elsewhere. This new Labour government is to be applauded for reversing the previous government's refusal to allow onshore wind farms, the freezing of North Sea oil licenses, and the closing of the last coal-fired power station, and the creation of a state-owned Great British Energy. It's not just down to the government, though, to take action. Locally, our climate and ecology strategy was rated the best in London and in the top 10 nationally. We've been given an A rating for our climate leadership alongside leading districts and cities worldwide. It's all very well having strategies, isn't it? It's making the changes that are important. And as my colleagues have just said, we've installed over 2,800 electric vehicle charging points, with more planned to reduce the emissions from fossil fuel-powered combustion engines in the borough. I'm not going to go on with repeating what other things my colleagues have said. There's too many projects going on, but here's just a quick taster. And one thing that I find particularly interesting is that the new Wood Lane cycle lane, which is about to be built, is going to be using permeable asphalt to reduce the risk of flooding. We're greening the grey in the borough. Look at the planting along Talgarth Road, Bridget Joyce Square in White City, Eelbrook Common, and the wildflower borders in Bentworth Road. All council buildings are now powered by 100% renewable electricity. The Macbeth Centre, Masborough Centre, and the Age UK Centre in Greyhound Road all have low carbon heat pumps. The new developments at Lannoy and Hartop, Lily Road and Farm Lane will all meet, or at least nearly meet, passive house standards, drastically improving their energy efficiency. We have an energy strategy and an energy efficiency task force set up to reduce carbon emissions from fossil fuels. Colleagues mentioned the ground source heat pump and heat network at the Civic campus. That's not the only heat network that's been developed. We've produced a plan for net zero compatible district heat networks within the borough, funded by the Mayor of London's Local Energy Accelerator Programme. Our cross-borough energy master plan has modelled five potential heat networks. 2 are completely in borough and 2 are cross-borough. For example, at Earls Court, White City, Hammersmith Town Centre and Olympia. But let's not forget about those the residents who we always talk about, already in fuel poverty as energy prices have rocketed over the last few years, and the uses of phrases like heat or eat have become commonplace. Our fuel poverty strategy, developed by Councillor Harvey and referred to earlier in one of the previous debates, aims to engage with and slash fuel poverty rates across the borough by 2030. As members of Western Riverside Waste Authority, just as another example, we're discussing plans for an innovative carbon capture scheme to be developed by Corey, who run the incinerator plant in Belvedere, where all the residual waste goes. The new government has committed £1 billion to the development of such technology. There are many other projects dealing with climate change in the pipeline, but I've only concentrated on a few. If you want to know more about them, do make sure you've signed up to the Climate Connect newsletter. It's coming out in about 2 weeks' time again. Support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dinsmore, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Decarbonisation is a noble and worthy aim. Indeed, it is essential to the long-term stability of the globe. That is why Margaret Thatcher raised it with the UN in 1987, long before it was on the socialist agenda. That is why this party began the move away from coal under Thatcher, which this council seeks to celebrate today.
Councillor Dinsmore, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but unfortunately the guillotine has now fallen.
Excellent.
And if
well,
could
long live
please
Thatcher,
wind
thank
up
you.
Yes, sorry. Councillor Melton, do you want to exercise your right to reply to sum up the debate?
Yes, please.
Take it easy.
Okay. Okay, we've heard a lot of calls on Labour members to do the right thing this evening. Unusually, I'd like to express sympathy for the opposition. Many of whom I know take decarbonisation as seriously as we do in the Labour Party. We've heard a lot about the effectiveness of market-based solutions, but within weeks, we'll be observing a market failure. Shortly, they will soon face the unenviable choice between two climate change deniers to be the next Conservative leader, both still peddling the same lies and deceptions already rejected by the British people, which seemingly remain articles of faith within the Conservative Party. Their choice is between Kemi Badenoch, who's chosen to accept a £10,000 donation from Net Zero Watch, one of the UK's most infamous climate science denial groups.
Sorry, excuse me, please.
Which I'm sure.
Sorry, well, please stop. I cannot hear a thing. Sorry, just give me.
Which I'm sure played no role in her decision to make the mendacious and economically illiterate claim that decarbonisation would bankrupt the UK, or the whiplash-inducing Robert Jenrick, who, fresh from his Damascene conversion to anti-immigration bigotry, has performed another 180-degree U-turn in the face of climate, describing net zero targets established by his own government, which he personally voted for, as dangerous, fantasy, green politics, unmoored from reality. If this is the best and the brightest the Tories can offer, I think it sounds like a market failure to me.
Thank you, Councillor. Right. Is the motion agreed?
That was very poor. It really was.
Sorry, if we want to leave tonight, we would want to stop right now, please. Is the motion agreed? That is, we're not breaking rules, Councillor, we're not breaking rules. That's okay. We have to respect, those are the rules. So the motion's agreed? Right. Pardon? You're not agreeing. There's so much confusion, I can't. Do you agree with the motion? No, that's fine. So I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Yep. Those against? Those not voting? I declare the motion carried. Special motion 3.
It has been withdrawn.
It's withdrawn. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that is the end of tonight's meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for attending or watching. Good night and safe home. Thank you.
We're going to put this stuff in the bag.